Chapter 1, My Days as a Laborer in the Miao family's Silkworm Room. This is our clan's Silkworm Room. From now on, you'll be solely responsible for all the spirit silkworms here. Each month, you must cultivate at least 100 second-grade spirit silkworms and 9,000 cocoons to meet the quota. Additionally, the number of lost or damaged spirit silkworms cannot exceed 10, otherwise, I won't be able to protect your position. Rest assured, Elder Steward. I will spare no effort and guarantee the completion of this task. Good. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave. If anything goes wrong in the Silkworm Room, contact me immediately. I'll keep your words in mind, Elder Steward. Take care on your way. Miao Xian escorted the rail-thin steward out the door, the obsequious smile on his face fading as his eyes grew distant. After spending most of my savings, I've finally secured this position. I wonder just how much benefit this job, chosen with the help of my cheat, will bring me. A glimmer of anticipation flickered in his eyes. He had been in this world for 3 months now. Like other transmigrators, he possessed a cheat, but his innate talent was mediocre, and he had started as an orphan. His cheat was unique, perhaps due to a soul mutation triggered by his transmigration, allowing him to see the fortunes of himself and others across different periods. In his vision, every person emitted an aura of varying colors, some bright, some dim, shifting constantly with the passage of time. These auras generally came in 5 colors: white, green, blue, purple, and orange. After days of observation, he had categorized them. White aura, first-tier fortune, labeled unremarkable. Green aura, second-tier fortune, labeled fortune's turning. Blue aura, third-tier fortune, labeled luck overflowing. Purple aura, 4th-tier fortune, labeled auspicious purple. Orange aura, 5th-tier fortune, labeled great fortune. The brighter the aura, the stronger the fortune, the larger its range, the longer it would last. The first thing he did every morning was check his own fortune for the day. If it was purple, he would go fishing. If blue, he would mine. If green, he would venture into the mountains. As for the rarest and most terrifying, orange, in this world where power was built upon the goo master system, such fortune was naturally best suited for refining goo. Different goo recipes had vastly different success rates, with some as low as 1 in 1,000, or even 1 in 10,000, making them nearly impossible to refine. Few dared to attempt such recipes, ones that could bankrupt them with no guarantee of success. But for someone who could see his own fortune, it was different. By choosing the time when his luck was strongest, no goo, no matter how difficult, was beyond his reach. After all, the harder a goo was to refine, the more powerful it tended to be. So what if his talent was poor? With this cheat, he was born to be a goo master. As long as he was clever enough, this cheat could be used in countless ways. In the Miao family, new disciples were forcibly assigned tasks. It was during an orange fortune period that he had drawn the lot to work here as a laborer. Being a laborer in the Silkworm Room was a lucrative position. To secure it, he had spent most of his savings bribing the skinny steward in charge of assignments. He trusted the path his orange fortune had pointed him toward. This was undoubtedly the shortest route to the pinnacle of this world. Clenching his fists, Miao Xian finally turned and headed toward his new home. Finding his quarters wasn't difficult. A dilapidated wooden hut stood alone in the courtyard. After a cursory glance, he pushed the door open. The room was Spartan, with barely any furnishings, just a bed, a table, and a chair. Miao Xian opened the window, gave the room a quick clean, then sat down near the windowsill. From his insect-rearing pouch, he pulled out a black-bound manual titled The 5 Poison Scripture and began studying it intently. His pouch held no goo insects yet, only inanimate objects. Speaking of the black-bound manual he had just retrieved, he couldn't help but recall the original owner's death. Children of the Miao family were given one free opportunity to choose a cultivation manual when first entering the goo path. Dozens of manuals were available, though all were low tier. The best techniques were naturally not so easily obtained by ordinary people. Yet the choice of manual was crucial. Not only did it determine combat strength, but also the speed of cultivation. A goo master with a top-tier manual would progress far faster than others, giving them an innate advantage from the start. Over time, the gap would only widen. In cultivation, falling behind early meant staying behind forever. Choosing a worthless manual would inevitably leave one trailing far behind their peers, with little hope of ever catching up. The original owner, acutely aware of his mediocre talent and already slow cultivation speed, refused to let his manual slow him further. So, under the baffled stares of everyone, he had chosen the 5 poison scripture. Among the available manuals, the 5 poison scripture was the strongest, frighteningly so. Cultivating it promised rapid progress and easier breakthroughs. However, it came with a fatal flaw. This manual required refining the 5 poisons, using toxins to temper the body, a process fraught with danger. In the early stages, each breakthrough carried a 10% chance of death. In later stages, this mortality rate only increased. A 10% chance might not sound high, but when it came to life and death, it was no small matter. Those with poorer talent had even lower breakthrough success rates, especially at higher realms, where the chance might drop to 1%, or even 0.1%. Attempting a breakthrough 100 times might still not guarantee success. One might be lucky enough to succeed once, twice, or even 10 times, but no one could stay lucky forever. The more breakthroughs one attempted, the more inevitable failure became. And failure meant death. This was a manual that guaranteed death, the only question was when. With such a glaring flaw, who would dare cultivate it? Even the boldest would hesitate. The original owner, in a moment of folly, had become the lone outlier among his peers. His reasoning had been simple: breakthroughs in the early stages were easier. By using this manual to pull ahead of his peers, he could switch to a safer one later after a few breakthroughs. A few attempts shouldn't pose too great a risk. But ideals were one thing, reality was another. The original owner had died on his very first attempt, paving the way for Miao Xian's transmigration. The scene remained vivid in his memory. The original owner lay on the cold ground, his body wreathed in black light, his face nearly obscured. At the time, Miao Xian hadn't understood. Only later did he realize that beyond the 5 colors of fortune, there was another, black, representing negative fortune. The darker the black, the worse the luck. It rarely appeared on ordinary people. He had labeled this tier of fortune, plagued by misfortune, stay indoors. During such times, stepping outside could mean stepping in dung, choking on water, or even suffering disasters while lying idle at home. Honestly, what kind of fool would attempt a breakthrough during such a time? No wonder the original owner had died. Miao Xian shook his head ruefully before refocusing on the manual in his hands. Though he had read the 5 poison scripture many times, much of it still eluded him. But with no one else in the Miao family cultivating it, he had no one to ask, only himself to rely on for understanding. From what he could gather, the 5 poison scripture was a dual cultivation manual, refining both qi and the body. As a Gu master, the first priority was body refinement. Only when one's physique was strong enough to evade Gu insect attacks could they be considered a true Gu master. If the body was lacking, even the most powerful Gu would be useless, one could simply be taken out first. So no matter how grueling body refinement was, he dared not neglect it. Body refinement required vast amounts of meat to replenish vitality, while qi refinement demanded spirit stones to replenish spiritual energy. Without them, cultivation would be as slow as a tortoise. Meat wasn't a problem. He had ways to procure plenty of spirit fish, so food wasn't a concern. But spirit stones were another matter. He wasn't currently at a bottleneck, but every failed breakthrough cost a Gu master a significant amount of spiritual energy. After the original owner's failed attempt, Miao Xian still needed a large number of spirit stones to recover the lost energy. Yet his monthly wage as a silkworm laborer was only 20 spirit stones, far from enough. Though his talent was lacking, the 5 poison scripture allowed for astonishingly fast cultivation. Other laborers needed only 1 spirit stone per day, while he averaged 3, equivalent to the daily consumption of the Miao family's top geniuses. 20 stones would last him barely a week. As for the savings he had painstakingly accumulated using his cheat, most had gone toward bribing the skinny steward. Now, his pockets were nearly empty. Even heroes are stymied by lack of funds. It seems my next step should be figuring out how to make money. After a moment of contemplation, Miao Xian's gaze drifted to the rows of silkworm racks in the courtyard, finally remembering the spirit silkworms he would soon be tending. Looks like my first fortune will be dug up here. A faint smile crossed his face as he stood and pushed the door open, stepping toward the silkworm racks. 10 racks encircled the modest courtyard, each laden with plump spirit silkworms. Each worm was snow-white and pudgy, their cheeks bulging as they voraciously devoured leaves many times their size, adorable to behold. Miao Xian gently stroked one silkworm's plump body, feeling a strange sense of peace. Quickly reviewing the silkworm raising methods, a plan formed in his mind. The way silkworms were raised in this world differed from his previous one. The Miao family had their own secret techniques. Normally, spirit silkworms would eventually cocoon and transform into moths, ceasing silk production. But the Miao family had a method to keep them in their larval form even after cocooning, forcing them to produce silk indefinitely, for their entire lives. With silk output increased, the Miao family's profits naturally soared. Truly, the blackest of capitalists. Their method was simple: boil a pot of water, add a secret ingredient called spirit dust, then toss in all the cocooned silkworms and steam them over high heat. This prevented them from becoming moths and permanently sterilized them. The technique was called the silkworm boiling method. As for why the silkworms didn't die from being boiled, he had no idea, though he was curious himself. This method had another strange effect: after being steamed, some silkworms would emerge from their cocoons with an elevated grade, becoming the second-grade spirit silkworms the skinny steward had mentioned. A rare few might even experience a reversion or mutation, transforming into rarer, more precious silkworm breeds. Chapter 2: The First Silkworm Boiling. Mutant silkworm breeds were incredibly valuable, yet their emergence probability was vanishingly small, making the cultivation of even a single mutant strain the dream of every silkworm farmer. Those who succeeded would be rewarded by the Miao family elders with a premium goo recipe as their prize. However, what others considered nearly impossible to obtain might not be so difficult for him. He simply needed to choose the time when his fortune was at its peak to steam the cocooned spirit silkworms. Even if no mutant breeds emerged, he would still obtain a large number of second-grade spirit silkworms. By then, he could sell some of the second-grade silkworms or mutant breeds at the market, solving his spirit stone shortage. The reason why working as a laborer in the silkworm room was considered lucrative lay precisely in the allowable loss. The skinny steward had mentioned that no more than 10 spirit silkworms could be reported as damaged or dead. Where there were allowable losses, there was always room for embezzlement. The Miao family elders weren't ignorant of these underhanded dealings, but they genuinely weren't worried about laborers skimming profits. In the Miao family, any laborer who made outstanding contributions to the clan would be rewarded with goo recipes. If a laborer cultivated a mutant silkworm breed, they would receive a premium goo recipe. Producing large quantities of second-grade spirit silkworms would earn them a mid-grade goo recipe. To the family, bestowing goo recipes as rewards cost them nothing; they could hand out as many as they pleased without a second thought. Yet, if these premium recipes were put up for trade outside, their value would skyrocket, sparking fierce competition. Selling a secretly embezzled mutant silkworm breed on the black market wouldn't come close to matching the worth of a premium goo recipe. Even a fool would know which option to choose; no sensible person would even consider embezzling a mutant breed. As for those who skimmed the lowest value first-grade silkworms and reported them as losses, that was indeed hard to prevent. But with the no more than 10 loss rule, laborers couldn't embezzle much, the family's losses were negligible, and the higher-ups turned a blind eye. After all, if the overall strength of the family's laborers improved, the clan would ultimately benefit. Precisely because there were profits to be had, competition for silkworm room positions was fierce. Miao Xian had been forced to spend most of his savings just to secure this job, and the sting of that expense still lingered. Silkworms that had entered the cocooning stage were called spirit pupae. After gathering all the spirit pupae, Miao Xian returned to his hut. Now, everything was ready, all he needed was to wait patiently. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. That morning, after feeding all the silkworms, Miao Xian let out a soft sigh. For the entire 2 weeks, his fortune had remained stubbornly white. White fortune, unremarkable, was the default state for most people most of the time, neither lucky nor unlucky, making it unsuitable for boiling silkworms. His silkworm raising skills were still too unrefined. Without the boost of good fortune, he had only managed to cultivate 30 second-grade silkworms in half a month, and had accidentally killed 5 first-grade ones in the process. It seemed that a silkworm's health during boiling greatly affected its chances of upgrading. This was a serious disadvantage for someone as inexperienced as him. He had considered storing all the pupae and delaying the boiling process. Once all 5,000 silkworms in the room had cocooned, he could pick an auspicious day to steam them all at once. Not only would this be more convenient, but it would also reduce errors. It would even save on feed, since cocooned silkworms didn't need to eat. If his fortune was exceptionally high at the time, the entire batch might even turn into second-grade silkworms, an absolute windfall. But upon further reflection, he realized this was a terrible idea. While convenient, it would drastically reduce silk production. Cocooned silkworms had to be boiled immediately, no rest allowed. The sooner they woke, the sooner they could spin silk. They had to work non-stop, stockpiling pupae for convenience was out of the question. He was certain that if he actually tried this, he'd never meet the monthly quota of 9,000 cocoons set by the skinny steward. 100 pupae was the absolute limit, these would be saved for when his fortune peaked. As for the rest, they would have to be boiled the day they cocooned, regardless of timing. There was simply no other way. But he had overestimated his silkworm raising skills. Without his cheat, he was clearly incapable of meeting the monthly quota. The realization left him deeply frustrated. Trouble. If I don't get a top-tier fortune this entire month, things could go very wrong. As if in answer to his plea, the moment these words left his mouth, his body suddenly erupted in a dazzling violet glow, so bright it hurt to look at. Miao Xian's breath hitched, his eyes widening in shock. Holy! Fourth-tier fortune. Auspicious purple. Alright, little guys, time for a hot bath. His eyes gleaming, Miao Xian wasted no time. He yanked a large packet of powder from his insect-rearing pouch and hastily dumped it into the already boiling cauldron beside him. Then, sprinting like a madman, he dashed to a nearby silkworm tray, scooped it up with trembling hands, and rushed back to dump all 100 pupae into the roiling water. After stirring vigorously with a wooden pole, he shook off the excess water and stared eagerly into the cauldron. Now, all that remained was to wait. Once an incense stick's worth of time had passed and all the pupae floated to the surface, he would fish them out. Soon after, the silkworms would emerge one by one from their cocoons. Whether they would undergo a magnificent transformation was up to fate. Time crawled by as he kept vigil by the cauldron, his gaze flicking repeatedly to the burning incense stick, not daring to relax for even a second. When only a third of the incense remained, the embers creeping perilously close to its base, his heart pounded in his throat. Then, disaster struck. The brilliant violet glow around him chose that exact moment to flicker out, fading back into the dull white from before. Miao Xian glanced down at his arms and sighed softly. He had anticipated this and steeled himself for it. The duration of good fortune was unpredictable, sometimes long, sometimes fleeting. Lower-tier fortunes tended to last much longer, occasionally persisting for over a day. On such days, he could choose to mine or forage, activities that required extended time. But high-tier fortunes were notoriously brief, often lasting mere moments. Even if the aura's range was large, they were ill-suited for lengthy tasks. Of course, this was only true for him. Perhaps because transmigrators were akin to children of fate, his bouts of good luck came frequently and lasted longer than most. For others, a violet fortune might flash by in an instant, even a green one wouldn't linger long. This time, his violet fortune had lasted a full incense stick's worth of time, far exceeding the norm. He was already grateful. I wonder if the key to mutation lies in the early or late stages of boiling. If it's early, then the fading of my fortune won't matter much. A trace of nervousness flickered across his face. Just then, the flame finally reached the base of the incense stick, devouring the last remnants. Holding his breath, he swiftly fished out all the pupae, transferring them to a silkworm tray, where he waited, watching, hoping, for a miracle to unfold. Chapter 3, Mutant Silkworms. He didn't have to wait long. The spirit chrysalises in the silkworm box soon began to squirm, and one after another, the spirit silkworms emerged from their cocoons. Miao Xian widened his eyes, carefully observing the forms of the silkworms as they crawled out. Not a single one of the spirit silkworms treated with the secret medicinal steam had transformed into a moth. What emerged from the cocoons were still silkworms. However, their forms had undergone subtle changes compared to before pupation. Not only had their bodies grown slightly larger, but their eyes had also become noticeably bigger, rounder, and pitch black, gleaming with an almost unnatural luster. Before this, the eyes of these little creatures had been so small they were nearly invisible. The enlarged eyes gave the spirit silkworms a much more striking appearance. And these morphological changes were clear indicators of improved quality. This batch of first-grade spirit silkworms had completely evolved into second-grade spirit silkworms, instantly doubling their value. After a quick inspection, Miao Xian confirmed that every single silkworm had successfully upgraded. Not a single first-grade spirit silkworm remained in the entire breeding box. Overjoyed, he clenched his fists in triumph. 100 second-grade spirit silkworms, damn, this single batch had already fulfilled his monthly quota. Truly, the power of fourth-tier fortune, steaming 100 spirit silkworms without a single failure. His excitement was short-lived. Wait, this chrysalis is intact. The silkworm inside hasn't come out yet. His sharp eyes caught one unopened chrysalis, motionless and undisturbed. Anxious, he quickly picked it up, examining it with delicate care. Damn it! Don't tell me this one got cooked. A wave of tension gripped him. He had already lost 5 spirit silkworms under his care, this one couldn't die too. If the number of dead silkworms this month exceeded 10, forget any chance of skimming profits, keeping his job would be a miracle. Just as his panic reached its peak, the chrysalis finally stirred, twitching faintly like the others before it. It's moving. It's moving. Relief washed over him as he exhaled deeply. This last silkworm was clearly special, not only had it awakened later, but it was also slower to emerge. Miao Xian watched intently as the silkworm inched its way out of the cocoon in his palm, crawling sluggishly onto his fingers. Like the others, its appearance had changed, but unlike the second-grade spirit silkworms, this one was drastically different. It was red. A vivid, fiery red, like a flickering tongue of flame. The warmth of its tiny body radiated against his skin. His breath quickened, his cheeks flushing with excitement. Holy shit! This is a fire silkworm, a legendary fire silkworm. It hasn't appeared in the Miao family for years. To think I accidentally bred one. Is this the power of purple tier fortune? His heart pounded with exhilaration. As a silkworm-raising laborer, he had some knowledge of spirit insects. Fire silkworms were an exceptionally rare breed, their silk far more valuable than ordinary spirit silk. Garments woven from fire silk not only boasted superior physical resistance but also granted near immunity to fire-based attacks. They were the bane of fire attribute goo insects and fire-aligned goo masters. Given that, the worth of a fire silkworm in this world was self-evident. Of course, this one was still only first grade. No matter how rare, a first-grade spirit insect would never fetch an astronomical price, especially since, outside the Miao family, few even knew how to improve its quality. Under these circumstances, selling it elsewhere wouldn't yield much. After a moment's thought, Miao Xian decided to hand it over to the family. The contribution of breeding a fire silkworm was enough to exchange for a high-grade goo recipe. Having spent so long in this world, it was finally time to refine his first goo insect. He had delayed this step for 2 reasons. First, his status only granted him access to low-grade goo recipes, and his ambitions were far too grand for such mediocrity. Second, he had been too poor. Even with the best recipe, he couldn't afford the materials. He needed time to accumulate resources. Now, with 99 second-grade spirit silkworms ready for sale, money was no longer an issue. All he lacked was a proper goo recipe. The time to refine a goo has come. Fists clenched in excitement, he wasted no more time. After tidying the courtyard and activating the silkworm room's protective formation, he rushed out with the fire silkworm in hand. Half an hour later, Miao Xian stood before an imposing stone hall. Gazing up at the grand characters, Hall of Inheritance, carved into the plaque above the entrance, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of reverence. To learn the Miao family's exclusive goo recipes, this was the place. Those who rendered great service to the clan could acquire most of its legacy here. The Hall of Inheritance was overseen by the Elder of Inheritance, a position several ranks higher than a mere steward and reserved for one of the family's most formidable experts. While he had remained composed before the stewards who assigned his duties, today, facing this elder, his nerves betrayed him. "You're one of the silkworm attendants, aren't you? Have you bred a mutant strain?" A hoarse voice suddenly spoke from beside him. Startled, Miao Xian turned to see an old man leaning on a cane, his presence unnoticed until now. Clad in loose black robes, his long beard swaying slightly, the elder regarded him with a kindly smile, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Realizing who this was, Miao Xian hastily presented the fire silkworm with both hands. "Elder, this disciple unintentionally bred this fire silkworm. Please examine it." The Elder of Inheritance's expression shifted the moment he saw it. With urgent fingers, he plucked the curled-up, dozing fire silkworm from Miao Xian's palm, cradling it in his own as he stroked its back with visible delight. "Excellent. Truly excellent. It's been 50 years since a fire silkworm last appeared in the Miao family. Heaven smiles upon us." The elder's hands trembled with barely contained excitement. Though only a first-grade spirit insect, a rare mutant strain like this was an invaluable treasure for a clan renowned for silkworm cultivation. "The fire silkworm is of great importance to our family. You've done a tremendous service, boy. Speak. What reward do you seek?" Reluctantly, the elder tucked the fire silkworm into his own spirit pouch before turning back to Miao Xian, who stood waiting respectfully. "This disciple wishes for a high-grade goo recipe. May the contribution from submitting this fire silkworm be enough to exchange for one? Miao Xian met the elder's gaze boldly but with deference. Of course. The merit from this is more than sufficient for any high-grade goo recipe in our family's collection. The elder stroked his beard, smiling. You're a new attendant, aren't you? Not even a full year in service, and not yet a goo novice. For a mere laborer to qualify for a high-grade goo recipe in such a short time is nearly unheard of. I must admire your luck. All high-grade goo recipes are recorded in this tome. Choose one. With that, the elder handed him an ancient blue-bound book, its cover emblazoned with bold characters, Miao Clan's Compendium of High-Grade Goo Recipes. Then he waited in silence for Miao Xian's decision. Chapter 4, Selecting the Goo Recipe. Miao Xian took a deep, trembling breath, his chest swelling with excitement. After spending so long in this world, he would finally possess a high-grade goo recipe. His legendary journey as a goo master would begin this very day. Clenching his fists, he hesitated no longer. With both hands, he accepted the Miao Clan's Compendium of High-Grade Goo Recipes, flipping through its pages with barely contained eagerness. The crisp rustling of parchment echoed through the silent hall of inheritance. The book didn't provide complete recipes. For each goo, only the rarest primary insect was listed, while the other required spirit insects went unmentioned. However, it meticulously detailed every goo's abilities, along with the total materials needed and their success rates. Yet, despite these thorough descriptions, gauging a goo's true strength from text alone was nearly impossible. Especially for a novice like him, how could he possibly discern which recipes were superior? Most attendants in his position would have agonized over the choice, but Miao Xian had a clear goal. He sought out exclusively the recipes with the lowest success rates. Those with high chances of success. He didn't even glance at them, skimming past their lengthy descriptions without a second thought. So what if an amateur couldn't judge a goo's power? He deliberately picked the most ruinously difficult recipes. The harsher the restrictions, the greater the rewards. He refused to believe the hardest goo to refine would be weaker than common ones. With this method, his decision came swiftly. Within moments, he'd made his choice. The recipe with the absolute lowest success rate in the entire book, the Ember Goo. A bizarre, crimson toad stared back from the page, its body adorned with a tuft of white hair, 2 forelimbs, and a single hind leg. Beneath the illustration glared its horrifying success rate, 1 in 300. High-grade goo recipes were costly to begin with. An ordinary person attempting this one would bankrupt themselves long before succeeding. Even wealthy goo masters might balk. With the same resources, they could refine dozens of other high-grade goo. The effort-to-reward ratio was so skewed that only a fool would touch this recipe. Yet Miao Xian was disappointed. The success rate was still too high. He'd wanted something truly absurd, like 1 in tens of thousands. He had a masochistic streak. This disciple can't tell good recipes from bad, so I'll just pick at random. This Ember Goo will do. Affecting nonchalance, he pointed at the red toad on the page. The Elder of Inheritance glanced down, his expression twisting into something unreadable. Random, my foot. Of all the recipes, he'd randomly chosen the worst one in the book. Still, the Elder didn't suspect anything. Miao Xian had flipped through the pages so fast he couldn't have read anything properly. It did look like a blind pick. Are you certain? This is the least successful recipe here. No one has refined it in 300 years. You can still change your mind. After a pause, the Elder offered this kindness. This disciple is resolved. The harder the goo is to refine, the fiercer it must be. I trust my choice. Miao Xian clenched his fists, his voice steel. He was gambling, betting that the Ember Goo, with its abysmal odds, was the strongest high-grade goo here. Truthfully, he had no idea how strong it actually was. The Elder sighed. Difficulty equals strength? There's some truth to that, but you must consider the cost. The Ember Goo trades practicality for marginally better power. It's not that much stronger than others. All it does is spit fireballs, and the number it spits is as random as your luck. Sometimes one, sometimes a barrage. On exceptionally good days, who knows how many it might unleash. His tone shifted slightly. However, when it only spits one fireball, its destructive force matches an average high-grade goo. That's its floor. So even on your worst days, it won't drag you down, it'll still perform as a proper high-grade goo. As for its ceiling, no one knows. Seeing Miao Xian's unwavering expression, the Elder relented. Very well. Since you're determined, I'll say no more. Here's the complete ember goo recipe. Memorize it here, you cannot take it with you. With that, the elder tossed him a goatskin parchment bearing the ember goo's image. Miao Xian caught it eagerly, devouring the listed materials with frantic intensity. This goo was as random as he adored it already. He always holed up to cultivate on unlucky days, only venturing out when fortune smiled upon him. With that habit, the ember goo would always perform at its peak for him. Even if forced to travel on a white luck day, it wouldn't matter, its minimum power was still high grade. Choosing any other goo would have capped him at that same baseline. This was the optimal choice. The ember goo was perfect for him, a match made in heaven. Watching his glee, the elder shook his head again. He'd seen this countless times before. The world was full of bankruptcy recipes no sane person would touch. But the world was vast, and headstrong fools like this one were always popping up. Dazzled by the promise of overwhelming firepower, they charged ahead without thought. In his century as elder of inheritance, he'd lost count of how many he'd tried to dissuade. Almost none listened. Spirit insects, the materials for goo, are graded differently. They range from 1st to 7th grade, and even a 3rd grade spirit insect is rare enough that you won't find them in common markets. All materials for the ember goo are stocked in the clan, except for the 3-legged blaze toad, a 3rd grade spirit insect. You'll have to search outside. Miao Xian looked up sharply. Elder, where might this disciple find one? You'll need to fish the formless ghost river. The elder pointed north. It lies beyond the Miao clan's northern mountains, not far from here. The 3-legged blaze toad rarely appears there. Remember, all 3rd grade spirit insects are dangerous, and the blaze toad is among the deadliest. It spits fire. A novice goo master like you would die instantly if hit. But once it bites a hook, it stops attacking, that's your only chance to catch it. Still, they're exceedingly rare. With bad luck, you might fish for a year without seeing one. Let's see if your fortune holds. The elder's gaze drifted south. Alternatively, you could try the rogue cultivator's market downhill. Maybe some independent hunter caught one and put it up for sale. Miao Xian's eyes gleamed as he followed the elder's gesture. He loved luck-based challenges. Right now, all he needed was another stretch of decent fortune, a few days fishing the formless ghost river, and the ember goo would be his. Rolling up the recipe, he handed it back respectfully. This disciple has memorized it. So quickly. The elder blinked, accepting the parchment. If you're done, you may leave. I've a fire silkworm to study. Your disciple takes his leave. Bowing, Miao Xian turned on his heel. Once outside, he headed straight for the rogue cultivator's market. With no guarantee when his next lucky streak would come, selling a few 2nd-grade spirit silkworms for upfront funds was the smart move. If he caught a blaze toad during good luck, he could refine the ember goo immediately. As for why he didn't procure materials through the clan, after some thought, he dismissed the idea entirely. Though the elder had said the clan had most materials, high-grade goo ingredients were expensive. A newly hired attendant splurging on them would scream embezzlement. Chapter 5, The Rogue Cultivator Market. Half an hour later, Miao Xian stood before the entrance of the Rogue Cultivator Market, recalling the original owner's memories of this place. The market served as a crucial trading hub for goo masters, a place where they could freely exchange treasures, and also functioned as a gathering spot for practitioners of the craft. It was a chaotic mix of goo masters from major families, rogue cultivators, and even ordinary mortals. Goo masters from all factions could come to do business here, and practitioners of any status could purchase the treasures they desired. The market brimmed with all manner of rare and exotic items, virtually any treasure in this world might be found within its stalls. In the southern border, markets of all sizes were countless, and this rogue cultivator market near the Miao family was but one of the most insignificant among them. Limited by resources, the goo masters who frequented this market were mostly goo children, making it a gathering place exclusively for low-level practitioners. Apart from the market's guardians, it was rare to see goo masters above the goo child level here. For the weak, this meant they didn't have to worry about being casually obliterated by powerful figures, which attracted vast numbers of low-level rogue cultivators. Precisely because the rogue cultivator population here was so overwhelming, the place had earned its name, the Rogue Cultivator Market. According to the original owner's memories, this was a paradise for the weak, where one hardly needed to fear being killed and robbed by higher-level goo masters. Miao Xian was quite satisfied with this place. Doing business with those of his own level brought him both comfort and peace of mind. He had no desire to trade with higher-level practitioners while constantly looking over his shoulder. This market gave him a solid sense of security. After absorbing all the information about the market, Miao Xian donned the ghost-faced mask he had prepared earlier and finally stepped through the gates. Even though Gu masters above the Gu child level were rarely seen here, a peak-stage Gu child could still easily end his life. He deemed it necessary to disguise himself. Step right up, take a look. Master, use freshly brewed honey fruit wine, just one sip rapidly restores spiritual energy. Only 40 spirit stones per jug, don't miss out. Behold the life-stealing scorpion Gu I've refined, a speed-type Gu insect capable of taking heads from 1,000 meters away. Today only, a tearful clearance sale, just 100 spirit stones. You'd be a fool to pass this up. Come one, come all. Shopkeeper Sher's Blackstone Python has shed its skin. Armor crafted from this serpent's hide offers top-tier defense. A rare opportunity, once it's gone, it's gone. The moment Miao Xian entered the market, his ears were assaulted by the cacophony of hawkers lining the streets. Vendors peddled their wares from makeshift stalls along the roadside, many of them surrounded by bustling crowds haggling loudly, creating a lively and vibrant atmosphere. Though most stall owners were rogue cultivators, the treasures they offered were far from lacking. Finding rare items here largely depended on luck. Given the sheer number of rogue cultivators who frequently ventured into dangerous territories, there was no telling what kind of treasures might surface in their hands. The elder who had instructed him in cultivation had advised him to search the market for the three-legged golden toad, a suggestion born of experience. After making a quick round through the market, Miao Xian found quite a few items that piqued his interest. The honey fruit wine that restored spiritual energy, for instance, or the assortment of close combat weapons. But none of these were immediate necessities for him, and with his meager funds, he reluctantly dismissed them all. The market's vendors changed daily, and the treasures on display refreshed just as frequently. He decided he could set aside a specific day for treasure hunting, waiting for a stroke of good fortune before returning to scour the market, where he might find items that would greatly aid him. Realizing that visiting during auspicious times would maximize his gains, he abandoned further idle browsing and headed toward a shop called Li's Treasure Exchange. In addition to the countless rogue cultivator stalls, the market also housed shops established by various Gu master families. Li's Treasure Exchange was one such shop, run by an external faction. Selling his second-grade spirit silkworms to an outside party seemed the most prudent choice. "Excuse me, do you purchase spirit silkworms here?" Miao Xian stepped inside and addressed a portly Gu master dressed in lavish robes. With only one person in the shop, it wasn't hard to guess, this man was the proprietor. "Scram! We don't buy that trash. Take your junk to the shop across the street, we don't deal in scrap here." Li Yang waved him off impatiently, his voice dripping with disdain. Ever since being assigned to manage this backwater branch, he'd been plagued by Miao family's servants sneaking in to sell him spirit silkworms. The problem was, these servants were too timid, offering only low-value first-grade silkworms, never the more valuable second-grade or mutated variants. With only a limited number of rogue cultivators in the area interested in sericulture, the market for first-grade silkworms had quickly become oversaturated. Now, he was stuck with a surplus of first-grade silkworms he couldn't unload, a financial loss that weighed heavily on him. So when yet another person tried to peddle first-grade silkworms, his temper flared, and he saw no reason to be polite. Miao Xian's expression darkened. He hadn't expected such venomous hostility from this bloated fool over a simple inquiry. Anger simmered within him. But with no Gu insects to rely on and zero combat ability, he had no choice but to suppress his fury and head toward the opposite shop. Fine. If that's how it is, he'd take his future mutated silkworm business elsewhere, straight to this man's competitor. Muttering curses under his breath, Miao Xian strode into Wan's Treasure Exchange. Little did Li Yang know just how much business he had just driven into his rival's hands. "Pardon me, do you accept spirit silkworms here?" Upon entering, Miao Xian approached a handsome young man whose hat bore the embroidered character, Wan. No need for guesswork, the hat marked him as the shop's proprietor. This manager was far more courteous, smiling as he replied, "If the silkworms you're offering are first grade, I'm afraid we aren't purchasing those at the moment. You might try the markets farther away." Miao Xian glanced around before leaning in and whispering, "What if I told you I have second-grade spirit silkworms? How much would you offer?" At these words, Wan Ling's expression stiffened, a flicker of surprise crossing his eyes. Like Li Yang, he had assumed this seller was peddling first-grade silkworms. After all, there had never been an exception before. His earlier politeness had merely been professional habit, not wanting to alienate a potential customer. Never had he imagined that a routine courtesy would yield such an unexpected windfall. With a peculiar glance toward Li Yang's shop, he suppressed a smirk and whispered back. "So you're selling second-grade silkworms?" "Heh, Li Yang's loss is my gain." I wonder what face he'd make if he knew he'd just handed business to his archrival. Probably sick with regret, haha. After his laughter subsided, Wan Ling extended 4 fingers. "This much, 40 spirit stones per worm. I'll take as many as you've got." He paused, then added gravely, "The silkworms your Miao family cultivates with its secret methods are sterile, and their morphology differs slightly from those on the open market. Since this is Miao territory, the family higher-ups might turn a blind eye if first-grade silkworms leak into circulation. But if second-grade silkworms start appearing, they may not be so lenient. I can guarantee I won't sell your second-grade silkworms in this market. I'll transport them far beyond the Miao family's reach, minimizing any risk to you." Wan Ling's smile faded, his gaze turning solemn. His extra words were a calculated move, to secure a long-term partnership, ensuring this seller would never take second-grade silkworms elsewhere. Miao Xian frowned slightly. Originally, he had planned to breed thousands of second-grade silkworms in secret, amassing cultivation resources through large-scale sales. But now, that plan seemed unworkable. To reduce exposure, he'd have to limit his dealings to this one shop, and even then, he couldn't sell too many. Otherwise, this one manager might suspect he possessed a method for mass-producing second-grade silkworms, potentially arousing the greed of this merchant faction. The consequences would be dire. With a quiet sigh, Miao Xian abandoned his dream of becoming a silkworm magnate. Yet another problem remained. After scouting the market, he had a rough idea of second-grade spirit insect prices. They generally sold for several dozen spirit stones, so 40 was already generous. Since second-grade silkworms could produce valuable silk, their price tended to be higher. Wan's offer was fair. But the Ashen Goo recipe required 10 second-grade spirit insects and 1 third-grade. Even if the 3-legged golden toad cost him nothing, the other insects would still set him back hundreds of spirit stones. Factoring in daily cultivation expenses, he'd need to sell at least 10 second-grade silkworms to cover the costs. Chapter 6, The Female Neighbor Miao Yu. Including the spirit silkworms he had previously raised to death, selling another 10 second-grade spirit silkworms would far exceed the maximum allowable loss for the silkworm room, leaving him momentarily hesitant. After a moment of contemplation, he gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and decided to take the risk. He had no other choice. He couldn't afford to wait. The best option now was to sell the 10 second-grade spirit silkworms. As for the issue of exceeding the loss quota, he planned to exchange second-grade silkworms with other silkworm room attendants for first-grade ones. He refused to believe no one would jump at such a bargain. Though he couldn't meet the loss quota, he had far surpassed the target of cultivating 100 second-grade silkworms. What he lacked in other areas, he made up for in second-grade silkworms. Since he could only embezzle 10 at most, giving some away didn't bother him in the slightest. It never crossed his mind to trade second-grade silkworms for a mid-grade goo recipe. Such things were beneath his notice. Without further hesitation, Miao Xian quickly retrieved 10 second-grade spirit silkworms from his insect pouch and discreetly slipped them into Wan Ling's hand. Wan Ling felt his palms suddenly grow heavy. Looking down, he saw 10 plump worms nestled in his hand, his eyes widening in genuine shock. Damn, when he'd said he'd take as many second-grade silkworms as offered, he'd been speaking casually, almost joking. He truly hadn't expected this young man to produce so many second-grade silkworms at once. This was a transaction worth a staggering 400 spirit stones, a major deal by any measure. Li Yang had really screwed up this time. Wan Ling shot a mocking glance toward Li Yang's shop across the street, a sly grin tugging at his lips. Excellent, truly excellent, plump, healthy second-grade silkworms. With practiced nonchalance, Wan Ling pocketed the 10 silkworms, though whether by accident or design, his movements weren't subtle enough to escape Li Yang's notice. Seeing this, Li Yang's face darkened instantly, his mouth twisting in barely suppressed fury. This storage pouch happens to contain just over 400 spirit stones. Consider the pouch and the extra stones a gift, a token of friendship. If you come across any more treasures in the future, I hope you'll think of us first. In unusually high spirits, Wan Ling tossed the pouch toward Miao Xian with uncharacteristic generosity. Something told him this wouldn't be a one-time deal. This young man might well become a steady supplier of second-grade silkworms, justifying this rare act of largesse. Miao Xian caught the heavy storage pouch with a smile. Storage pouches were essentially cut-rate versions of insect pouches, capable only of holding inanimate objects, unlike insect pouches which could store both living and dead matter. Even so, storage pouches weren't cheap. This was no small favor. He couldn't help but admire this shopkeeper's business acumen. Both were shopkeepers, yet the difference in their approach was staggering. Of course. If I find anything good in the future, you'll be my first stop. Acknowledging the gesture, Miao Xian tied the pouch to his belt and strode out of Wan's treasure exchange without a backward glance. Take care. Wan Ling saw him out, then, catching sight of Li Yang's thunderous expression across the street, burst into laughter. Thanks for nothing. Ha ha ha. After leaving Wan's shop, Miao Xian moved swiftly between various stores. Before long, he'd gathered all 10 second-grade spirit insects needed to refine the ashen goo. Purchasing goo recipe materials from a single shop would essentially mean giving the recipe away for free, so he had no choice but to visit multiple stores, wasting considerable time in the process. By the time he returned to the silkworm room, evening had fallen. Exhausted, Miao Xian sat on his bed and carefully counted his remaining spirit stones. The ashen goo materials had cost him 203 stones, and that was after extensive haggling. Without negotiation, the price would have been dozens higher. When you started poor, every stone counted. The 10 second-grade silkworms had netted him over 400 stones. After deducting the goo materials cost, his storage pouch still held more than 200, ensuring no immediate shortage of cultivation resources. With ample spirit stones secured, Miao Xian saw no reason to keep living frugally. He prepared to enter seclusion immediately, aiming to reach his cultivation bottleneck at maximum speed. Crossing his legs on the bed, a spirit stone in each hand, he soon slipped into deep meditation. Time flashed by, half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Damn it! Another one dead. That afternoon, standing in the silkworm room's courtyard, Miao Xian stared helplessly at the lifeless silkworm cradled in his palms. For 15 days he'd been painstakingly careful, yet still managed to kill 8. Adding the 5 that died earlier, this month's toll reached 13. Factor in the 10 he'd sold, and the total deficit ballooned to 23, far beyond the monthly allowable loss. The thought of skinny supervisor's inspection tomorrow made his head throb. Screw it. Time for Plan B. Snatching up his insect pouch, Miao Xian rushed out of the courtyard. Though his silkworms had suffered heavy casualties this month, the number of second-grade ones produced was impressive. Under Purple Fortune, he'd cultivated 99, with another 64 during normal periods. Combined, that made 163, well above quota. But merits couldn't offset faults. Left with no choice, he'd have to trade second-grade silkworms for first-grade ones with other attendants. Outside silkworms differed from Miao families, so only fellow attendants could help. To minimize exposure, he needed to keep the number of trading partners low. Soon, he arrived at his neighbor's quarters and knocked. Hearing a crisp, "Come in," he pushed open the gate. The moment he stepped inside, his eyes darted greedily across the silkworms covering shelves throughout the courtyard before settling on their center, a young woman sipping tea leisurely at a stone table. 16 years old, clad in Miao attire adorned with exquisite silver ornaments, she sat barefoot, the silver chains around her ankles glinting hypnotically. She was one of the few clanspeople whose name he remembered, not because of her striking beauty, but because auspicious fortunes appeared around her with uncanny frequency, far surpassing normal levels. This demanded attention. Everything about her screamed, favorite of heaven, though obscure now, she'd undoubtedly blossom into a monstrous talent. After a quick head-to-toe appraisal, Miao Xian cut straight to the chase. I'll trade second-grade silkworms for your first-grade ones. 1 for 2, deal. Second-grade spirit insects value far exceeded first-grade silkworms. Even 1 for 3 or 1 for 5 exchanges would find takers. His intentionally unfavorable 1 for 2 rate aimed to deliberately reduce his second-grade surplus. After all, those silkworms weren't truly his, no real loss. An excess of second-grade silkworms in his room might arouse suspicion, a risk he couldn't afford. At the mention of trading second-grade for first-grade silkworms, a glimmer flashed through Miao Yu's eyes before vanishing. She took a delicate sip of tea, studying him with amusement. Such generosity. After a pause, she continued, if I had to guess, you've lost over 10 silkworms and can't handle tomorrow's inspection. How many died? Another unhurried sip, her composure unshaken. Not many. Just 23, Miao Xian answered truthfully. Pfft. Tea sprayed from Miao Yu's mouth as she gaped at him. How many? 23. Did I hear that right? How in heaven's name did you manage that? Brother, do you even know how to raise silkworms? Are you some kind of silkworm executioner? Her wide-eyed disbelief made Miao Xian flush with embarrassment. Her reaction confirmed his number was abnormally high. Chapter 7, The Arrival of the Thin Steward. Oops. Just a careless mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. How many moon spirit silkworms did you lose this month? Xian asked nonchalantly, forcing an air of composure. 0. Not a single one died. I'm the silkworm-raising prodigy of the family. Miao Yu raised her fist, her face brimming with pride. Miao Xian promptly shut his mouth. Well, comparisons are odious. He shouldn't have asked, now he'd been thoroughly humiliated. Enough chit-chat. Are you trading or not? If not, I'll find someone else. Miao Xian had no interest in continuing the conversation and decisively cut to the chase. Trade. Of course I'll trade. Only a fool would refuse. Miao Yu lifted her chin, her gaze fixed on him as she asked, go on, how many do you plan to exchange? After a moment of thought, Miao Xian replied, since you reported 0 losses, I'll trade 10 with you. I'll make up the rest by bartering with other silkworm tenders. But the moment he finished speaking, Miao Yu grew flustered and quickly stood up. Wait. Even though none of my silkworms have ever died, I report 10 losses every month. I've got as many first-grade spirit silkworms as you could want. Miao Xian shot her a surprised glance, thinking to himself, looks like this girl's a real embezzler. Miao Yu counted on her fingers for a while before finally declaring, after deducting the 10 reported losses, you'll only need 13 more first-grade spirit silkworms to cover the deficit. But you'll have to factor in the second-grade silkworms you're trading with me. That means you'll need to give me 13 second-grade silkworms in exchange for 26 first-grade ones to make up the shortfall. Though, come to think of it, do you even have that many second-grade silkworms? She eyed him skeptically, her expression dripping with doubt about his silkworm-raising skills. Don't worry. If you've got first-grade silkworms to spare, I've got second-grade ones in abundance. My skills might not be suited for first-grade silkworms, but second-grade? No problem. Regaining a shred of confidence, Miao Xian pondered briefly before adding, then I'll trade 14 second-grade silkworms for 28 first-grade ones. Technically, 26 would have sufficed, but after some deliberation, he decided to play it safe. What if another silkworm died tomorrow? He retrieved 14 second-grade silkworms from his breeding pouch and gently placed them on the table before turning toward the nearest silkworm rack. I'll just help myself, then. Go ahead. Take them. Miao Yu waved impatiently, her eyes glued to the 14 second-grade silkworms on the table as she fiddled with them gleefully, as though they were priceless treasures. At this point, she couldn't care less about Miao Xian, she wasn't even worried he might take extra. Hee. With these 14 second-grade silkworms, plus the contribution points I've saved up, I can finally exchange for a mid-grade goo recipe. Muttering to herself, she was completely lost in blissful anticipation. Miao Xian didn't hold back either, deliberately picking out the 14 largest, plumpest silkworms. In his mind, the bigger and fatter they were, the easier they'd be to raise. Hey, silkworm slayer, guess what? This young lady might just get to refine a mid-grade goo soon. Jealous? And it's all thanks to you. Miao Yu shot him a smug look, her face practically glowing with self-satisfaction. Miao Xian curled his lip in disdain. Just a mid-grade goo recipe, and she's this thrilled? Anybody could get their hands on one of those. He'd even obtained a high-grade recipe without breaking a sweat, it was nothing special. His thoughts reeked of smugness. Enjoy your little celebration. I'm out of here. With his objective achieved, he saw no reason to linger and turned toward the door. Go ahead and seethe with envy. Oh, and close the door on your way out. Suddenly remembering something, Miao Yu finally tore her gaze away from the second-grade silkworms and hurried over to her racks, her expression turning serious. She seemed intent on verifying the count, making sure none had been taken beyond what was agreed. Before long, an enraged shriek erupted from the courtyard. You bastard! You took all the biggest ones. Before they knew it, the next day arrived, and the thin steward, absent for a month, paid an early visit. Miao Xian rushed out to greet him, his face all smiles. Steward, this month's harvest is all in this breeding pouch. Please take a look. With both hands, he respectfully presented a bulging pouch. This month, he had successfully cultivated 163 second-grade spirit silkworms. After deducting the 14 traded with Miao Yu and another 10 sold off, 139 remained, far exceeding the quota. Aside from the 139 second-grade silkworms, the pouch also contained over 9,200 discarded cocoons, barely meeting the requirement. Miao Xian hadn't withheld a single cocoon. After all, the remaining quantity was so meager that even if all 200 cocoons were spun into silk, they'd barely yield 2 silkworm garments. First-grade silkworm robes could only block attacks from lower-grade goo insects and were practically worthless on the market, hardly worth the risk of embezzlement. Besides, first-grade spirit silkworms were already hard to sell in the bazaar, let alone their silk. Why go through all that trouble? Even so, the pouch assigned to the laborers by the clan was now packed to the brim. The thin steward first hefted the weighty pouch, then peered inside. He paid little attention to the pile of white cocoons, focusing instead on counting the second-grade silkworms. When he tallied 139, a satisfied smile spread across his face. Excellent. The number of second-grade silkworms far exceeds the quota. 139 is quite impressive. You've clearly put in the effort this month, the steward praised. If you produce 11 more next month, you'll qualify for a mid-grade goo recipe. Outstanding work. Consider this month a major accomplishment. After commending Miao Xian with a smile, the steward shifted gears. What about the reported losses? Given how diligent you've been, the death toll shouldn't be high, right? Miao Xian winced slightly but forced himself to answer, I'm afraid I've disappointed you, steward. This month's reported losses are 10. I still haven't been careful enough. Luckily, no more silkworms had died after he left Miao Yu's rearing room, so the actual number should have been 9. The extra one he reported was intentional. If he claimed 10 losses when only 9 had actually died, the thin steward could quietly pocket one second-grade silkworm for himself. Staying on good terms with one's superior was always wise. He was confident the steward would catch his drift. 10 deaths, huh? The thin steward studied him with an amused glint in his eye, skepticism plain. A silkworm-raising prodigy capable of producing 139 second-grade specimens wouldn't possibly let so many perish. Clearly, those 10 lost silkworms had been pocketed. As the overseer of multiple rearing rooms, he was well aware of the laborers' embezzlement tricks. He usually turned a blind eye, but that didn't mean he was oblivious. Sharing a knowing glance with Miao Xian, the thin steward's smile deepened with unspoken understanding. Chapter 8, Going Fishing. Very well, as long as the number of dead spirit silkworms doesn't exceed 10, it's no major issue. These second-grade spirit silkworms will all be taken away by me and handed over to clan members more skilled in silkworm rearing for concentrated cultivation, in hopes of breeding even more third-grade specimens. The breeding pouch and this month's wages will be delivered to you this afternoon. As he spoke, the thin steward tightened the pouch's drawstring and fastened it to his belt before moving to count the silkworms in the rearing room. Miao Xian reluctantly tore his gaze away from the pouch hanging at the steward's waist. It wasn't his personal property but rather a tool lent by the clan to facilitate labor. If a laborer were to leave their post someday, these pouches would have to be returned. Suddenly, Miao Xian felt the need to prioritize purchasing his own breeding pouch. With his growing list of secrets, a private pouch had become essential. Yet the thought of its exorbitant price made the corner of his mouth twitch, a familiar pang of financial inadequacy creeping in. The thin steward swiftly tallied the silkworms in the room and, unsurprisingly, discovered an extra one. Immediately grasping Miao Xian's intent, he shot him an approving glance. Not a single discrepancy, you've done well. A satisfied smile spread across the steward's face as he retrieved over 100 silkworm larvae from the pouch, carefully placing them on the stone table at the courtyard center. Silkworms steamed with our clan's secret method lose their reproductive capacity, so any losses are replenished by the family. This month, you cultivated 139 second-grade silkworms and reported 10 losses, so I'm compensating you with 149 larvae. Ensure they're well cared for. I must visit the other rearing rooms now, so I won't linger. With that, the thin steward finally took his leave. Miao Xian respectfully saw him to the gate before returning to the stone table to count the larvae, and sure enough, one was missing. A faint smile tugged at his lips. The thin steward understood perfectly. As long as the steward accepted this bribe, minor missteps in the future would likely be overlooked. As he meticulously gathered the larvae from the table, a quiet sigh escaped him. Larvae took time to mature, and it would be a while before they spun silk, at least a month with no harvest to expect. This drastically increased the difficulty of meeting monthly quotas. The more second-grade silkworms he submitted, the harder next month's targets would become. For someone with only mediocre rearing skills like him, the pressure was palpable. With the steward's routine inspection concluded, a weight seemed to lift from Miao Xian's shoulders, leaving him noticeably lighter. After hurriedly feeding the silkworms, he retreated to his room and plunged into cultivation. The past half-month of ample spirit stones had accelerated his progress, and now he stood just shy of a breakthrough. In this world, Gu Master's realms progressed as follows: Gu Child, Gu Attendant, Gu Lord, Gu Sovereign. Each realm was further divided into early, middle, late, and peak stages. A successful breakthrough now would elevate him to Gu Child, early stage, formally entering the ranks of Gu Masters. Hence his urgency, every second counted in cultivation. Time flew, and 7 days passed in a blink. That morning, Miao Xian's first act was to check his fortune. The sight of his body glowing faintly green from head to toe sent a surge of exhilaration through him. Fortune has finally turned. After waiting so long, luck is on my side. Yet the question of how to spend this green luck day gave him pause. There was much to do, and all of it demanded good fortune. Days earlier, fueled by abundant spirit stones, he'd reached a bottleneck. By all logic, this stroke of luck was the perfect time to break through, nothing mattered more than advancement. Yet hesitation took hold. Each breakthrough in the 5 poison scripture carried a 10% mortality risk. While 1 in 10 odds were low enough that even the weakest green luck sufficed, his cautious nature yearned for a higher tier fortune when gambling with his life. Had the original host not already committed to this cultivation method, and had no alternatives been available, he might never have dared practice the 5 poison scripture at all. Better play it safe. Wait for stronger luck before breaking through. This green day will be for fishing, time to refine that high-grade Gu insect first. In the end, cowardice won out. Abandoning his breakthrough plans, he gathered his fishing gear and strode out the door. But one task remained first: steaming silkworms. The process took only the time of a single incense stick to burn, and with green luck lasting a full day, it wouldn't interfere with fishing. When the time passed, Miao Xian stared at the emerging silkworms, disappointment etched across his face. Only 30 second-grade silkworms from 100 pupae, how could he not feel let down? Last time, every single pupa had yielded second-grade specimens, with 1 mutated variety to boot. This drastic contrast was hard to swallow. Well, it's the lowest-tier green luck. This outcome was expected. But green fortune suits fishing well enough. It lasts the longest, and while the luck is weakest, fishing offers endless chances to retry. 1 cast yields nothing. Try 2. Still nothing. Make it 10. With enough attempts, how could I not hook a 3-legged bishi toad? Clenching his fists, Miao Xian shook off his frustration and marched toward the river, gear in hand. The faceless ghost river lay just north of the mountains, a mere half-hour's journey. One of the southern border's longest rivers, it twisted through treacherous terrain with raging currents and countless tributaries. Its waters teemed with high-grade spirit fish and insects, making it a vital resource for the Miao clan's food and Gu materials. Countless Miao Gu masters fished its banks daily. Yet the river's ghostly reputation stemmed from very real dangers. Many of its creatures were aggressive, claiming numerous lives yearly. These weren't fish for casual anglers. Though the river stretched endlessly, prime fishing spots were scarce. High-grade spirit fish favored deep, open channels brimming with opportunity and peril, placing them beyond low-level Gu masters' reach. The weaker could only fish shallow narrows, where safety came at the cost of poorer catches. Near the Miao estate, such shallow stretches were few, yet low-level practitioners were legion, crowding the limited spots daily. Where crowds gathered, commerce followed. Here, stalls sold bait, hooks, lines, rods, all the angler's essentials. Including fish pouches, spatial containers filled with water to keep catches alive indefinitely. No angler could do without one. Without it, fish would suffocate and rot, their flesh spoiling beyond salvage. Upon arrival, Miao Xian's eyes widened at the dazzling array of gear. Only then did realization strike: I'm woefully unprepared. Ordinary fish required little specialized equipment, but spirit fish were another matter. A quality rod was essential. Spirit fish fought with monstrous strength, snapping makeshift branches like twigs. A full set, pouch, bait, hooks, line, rod, would be needed here. The cost would be staggering. Being an angler had been expensive in his past life, but this world's version seemed downright ruinous. The mere thought made his head throb. Chapter 9, Bargaining. After returning from the market, I've spent quite a lot of spirit stones on cultivation lately. Even with the 20 stones I just received as my monthly allowance, I only have 160 spirit stones left on me. I'm not sure if that'll be enough. Miao Xian carefully counted the spirit stones in his possession, a pang of unease tightening his chest. Whatever. I'll just take it one step at a time. He let out a quiet sigh and strode briskly toward the stalls selling fishing bait. No matter what, he had to buy bait, and not just any bait, but the best available. He had never believed in the idea of fish willingly biting the hook. Fishing bait for sale. Exclusive secret recipe, 50 portions for just 1 spirit stone. Come take a look. Specially crafted bait with a high chance of luring second-grade spirit fish. Limited stock, first come, first served. Unique bait adored by toad-class spirit insects. 1 spirit stone for 10 portions. The overlapping cries of hawkers filled the air, twisting Miao Xian's face into a frown. He was an amateur, completely clueless about spirit fishing. How could he possibly distinguish good bait from bad? With so many stalls peddling bait, his eyes glazed over in indecision. After a long pause, he resolved to leave it to luck. Whichever fate chose, he'd go with. Given his current streak of good fortune, he trusted that even a random pick wouldn't land him the worst bait. Raising a finger, he muttered under his breath, "Little rooster, pick for me, whomever you point to, I'll choose." His finger finally landed on a disheveled middle-aged vendor. "Fine. You it is." Miao Xian approached the stall, which stood conspicuously deserted. Had it not been for luck's guidance, this would have been the first stall he'd have dismissed. "Why's your business so bad? Is the bait no good?" He sauntered up to the stall but didn't rush to buy. Instead, he eyed the vendor with curiosity. The scruffy man looked up and offered a self-deprecating smile. "This is bait I developed myself. It has an excellent bite rate and easily attracts high-quality spirit fish. But no one's willing to believe me. You're my first customer today. If you're interested, I can give you a discount, 1 spirit stone per portion." The vendor held up a single finger, his gaze brimming with hopeful expectation. Miao Xian's lips twitched. Good grief, 1 bait for 1 spirit stone. This was outright robbery. Now he understood why no one was buying. Who'd dare purchase bait at such a price? At this rate, the bait was nearly as expensive as the fish itself. Only a fool would fall for this. 1 spirit stone per portion, as if you're doing me a favor, huh? Are you insane? How dare you charge so much for a single bait? You might as well rob people. Miao Xian blurted, unable to contain himself. The vendor, as if anticipating the outburst, shook his head wearily. What do any of you understand? The more spiritual energy the bait contains, the more it attracts spirit fish, especially high-grade ones. But increasing the bait's spiritual energy inevitably raises the cost. There's no way around it. No pain, no gain. If you lack even this much courage, why bother fishing at all? With that, the scruffy man turned away, clearly no longer expecting a sale. Miao Xian hesitated, then gritted his teeth. He decided to trust the choice his luck had made. "Fine. I'll try your exclusive bait. But if it's useless, I'll smash your stall. Give me 20 portions to start." His face twisted in agony as he reluctantly handed over 20 spirit stones. Good heavens, just buying bait had drastically depleted his savings. Now he was down to 120 stones. Would that even be enough for a fishing rod? The vendor's demeanor instantly brightened. Flattery dripped from his words. "Ah, such discerning taste. I guarantee you'll land a big catch today. Do come again. Here's your bait. Take care." He packed 20 bait portions, each resembling fish balls, into a small pouch and handed it over. "Hope your words hold true." Miao Xian snatched the pouch and turned on his heel, heading straight for the fishing rod stalls. Again, he muttered, "Little rooster, pick for me, whomever you point to, I'll choose." This time, his finger led him to a stall run by a teenage boy. Appearances could be deceiving. Had it not been for his current green fortune, he'd never have dared buy from someone so young, barely 18, with spindly arms that hardly seemed capable of crafting fishing rods. Spotting 2 identical purple rods on display, Miao Xian skipped the inspection and cut straight to the point. "Care to introduce your rods?" The boy's stall was just as deserted. At the prospect of a sale, his face lit up. Of course. Don't let my age fool you, my craftsmanship speaks for itself. This rod is forged from second-grade rare metal, hence the name, rare metal fishing rod. The line is spun from golden silk, produced by mutated golden silkworms. Though only second-grade, not even a third-grade spirit fish could snap it. The float uses feathers from second-grade phoenix tail chickens, and the hook is made of amethyst. Nothing extraordinary about the float or hook, but they emit strong spiritual fluctuations, with a compounding effect. As you know, spirit fish are highly sensitive to spiritual energy. With my rod, you'll have no trouble landing big catches. The boy rattled off the description with pride, clearly pleased with his creation. Listening, Miao Xian grasped just how much a rod's quality affected fishing in this world. While luck alone could land high-grade spirit fish, a good rod drastically improved efficiency. He had to have this rare metal rod. Without a second-grade rod, catching the three-legged bishi toad would be impossible. Did he really think a mere stick could reel in a third-grade spirit toad? The idea was laughable. No more hesitation, he'd secure this rod at any cost. Skip the details. Just name your price, Miao Xian said. Straight to the point. Since you're my first customer, I'll cut you a deal, 240 spirit stones. The boy beamed, extending a hand for payment. Miao Xian's face darkened instantly. Good grief, another robber. He only had 140 stones left. 240. That was a whole 100 short. He'd expected second-grade rods to be pricey, but this was outrageous. And just like the last vendor, this was already a discounted price for the first customer. Chapter 10, From Green to Blue. Miao Xian pricked up his ears, listening to the haggling around him, and sighed inwardly. A second-grade fishing rod really did cost over 200 spirit stones. Poverty had truly limited his imagination. After a long silence, he finally mustered the courage to speak, his voice tinged with embarrassment. Well. How about this, could I rent the rod instead? Just for one day. What do you say? He held up a single finger, forcing the words out through gritted teeth. At this shameless proposal, the boy's smile froze, his face darkening instantly before he exploded in outrage. So you're broke. Why waste my time if you can't afford it? Are you mocking me? Rent for a day? Why not a year? Just take it for free, why don't you? Get lost. Go bother someone else, stop wasting my time. The boy waved him away impatiently and plopped back down, fuming. Miao Xian flushed with embarrassment. Realizing renting was impossible, he gave up and trudged toward the riverbank. Pulling out his makeshift branch fishing rod from his insect pouch, he couldn't help but sigh gloomily. 100 spirit stones short, where was he supposed to scrape together that much? At first, he had planned to start fishing immediately with his crude rod, selling whatever he caught to make up the difference. But then it struck him, this plan was flawed. His streak of good luck wouldn't last forever. He still needed ample time to catch the three-legged bishi toad. He couldn't afford to waste precious moments here. Damn it! Where am I supposed to get 100 stones? Do I just go home and let this lucky day go to waste? Just as frustration threatened to overwhelm him, as if his luck had intervened, a rough voice boomed beside him. Kid, you look like a decent angler. How about a little wager? The loser pays the winner 200 spirit stones. Ha ha ha. Miao Xian blinked, turning to see a burly man with a thick black beard staring at him with a challenging grin. He almost laughed, some people really had a death wish. This was like being handed a pillow just as he was about to doze off. A wager? Bring it on. But 200's too steep. Small bets for fun, big bets bring trouble. Let's keep it friendly, how about 100 stones? Name your terms. He grinned at the bearded man, his gaze as predatory as a wolf eyeing a lamb. Because just then, his fortune had shifted, from green to an even brighter blue. His luck was peaking. Any game of chance. He was invincible. As for why he'd have the bet despite his confidence. First, he didn't want enemies. Second, caution. His fishing skills were amateurish, his rod a joke. Relying entirely on fleeting luck. No guarantees. If he lost, 100 stones was manageable. Besides, he understood human nature, small bets were usually honored. But make it too large, and losers might welch. Or worse, seek revenge later. Weak as he was, he couldn't afford grudges. If not for his desperate need for a proper rod, he wouldn't have taken this bet at all, even with his current luck. His quick agreement stunned the bearded man, Miao Zhuang. He'd only joked upon seeing someone waving around a twig as a fishing rod. Never expected the kid to actually accept. For a moment, he just stood there, dumbfounded. Well, well. Never thought you'd actually agree. Truly, a newborn calf fears no tiger. If you're handing me free money, who am I to refuse? Recovering, Miao Zhuang's eyes gleamed with excitement. Let's keep it simple, whoever catches the most valuable fish within half an hour wins. Deal. He cracked his knuckles, grinning fiercely, already counting his winnings. Ever cautious, even against a twig-wielding amateur, he picked the most favorable rule. A branch rod would snap under anything stronger than a low-grade spirit fish. Unless it was a mundane fish or the weakest first-grade spirit fish, this kid stood no chance. How could he possibly lose? He couldn't even imagine a scenario where he did. Spectators, drawn by the commotion, began gathering around. Look at that rod. Ha! Did he just snap it off a tree? That thing can't possibly catch fish. I've lived decades and never seen such a joke of a fishing rod. If he lands anything with that, I'll eat dirt. Who is this lunatic? A branch? And he's betting against Miao Zhuang. The man's a legend here. The audacity. No wonder Miao Zhuang took the bet, this is just bullying. The crowd pointed and laughed, their jeers ringing in the air. Miao Xian ignored them. Guided by luck, he selected the prime fishing spot, calmly baiting his hook. With a practiced flick, his line arced gracefully onto the still river surface. Miao Zhuang watched from the corner of his eye, then, seeing his opponent cast, swiftly readied his own sleek black iron rod. A fat worm wriggled on the hook before he launched it dead center into the water. Silence fell as both men settled onto rocks, motionless, waiting. The onlookers hushed, not wanting to scare the fish away. Perhaps due to his blue fortune, Miao Xian's line twitched almost immediately. His eyes lit up. With a sharp tug, a gleaming white fish burst from the water, slapping onto the bank. Drawing gasps from the crowd. Chapter 11, Hooked. Miao Xian's unexpectedly quick catch left the onlookers stunned, their faces twisting with disbelief as they struggled to process what had just happened. But when they saw the type of fish he had reeled in, their shock dissolved into raucous laughter. Pfft! A completely spiritless mortal fish? That broken fishing rod really didn't disappoint. Ha ha ha. I thought someone fishing with a tree branch might actually be some kind of master, but this? This is hilarious. Is this guy here just to be a joke? Wait, look closer. There's something on that fish's belly. Just as the crowd was lost in mockery, a sharp-eyed observer finally noticed something unusual. Upon closer inspection, his eyes nearly bulged out of his skull. Good heavens, that black speck was actually a leech, firmly latched onto the plump fish's belly, greedily sucking its blood. Its body had already swollen to a grotesque roundness, as if bloated to bursting. Holy shit! That's a blood-scythe leech. He actually hooked a first-grade spirit insect with that piece of junk. At that exclamation, the others finally spotted the leech clinging to the mortal fish. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. No fucking way. He pulled up a blood-scythe leech with that trash rod. Am I hallucinating? You've got to be kidding me. Blood-scythe leeches are materials for refining mid-grade blood-sucking goo. They're insanely hard to catch. I've fished here for a whole month trying to get one for my goo refinement and came up empty. And he gets one on his first try. What kind of insane luck is this? Buy one mortal fish, get a spirit insect free? Is Zhuang Ji really about to lose to this? Hearing the crowd's shocked murmurs, Miao Zhuang hurriedly turned to examine the small mortal fish. When he saw the blood-scythe leech indeed clinging to its belly, his face turned ashen. What kind of dog's hit luck is this? How the hell did you manage that? Miao Zhuang's expression twisted as if he'd swallowed a fly. After a long pause, he finally tore his gaze away, fixing his eyes intently on the river's surface. For the first time, he felt real pressure. The mocking grin had vanished from his face. Catching fish in the water was easy, catching spirit insects was another matter entirely. At the same grade, spirit insects were far more valuable than spirit fish. Finding a spirit fish more valuable than a blood-scythe leech wouldn't be simple. He had no choice but to focus. If he lost today to this kid fishing with a tree branch, he'd never live it down. Miao Xian carefully stored the blood scythe leech in his insect pouch, unable to suppress the grin tugging at his lips. Starting the day with such a catch filled him with even more confidence for the bet ahead. With a light flick of his wrist, the baited hook plunged back into the river, sending ripples across the water's surface. This time, the wait was longer, nearly an incense stick's worth of time before any movement disturbed the water. Even so, this was still remarkably fast. In his past life, fishing had been a time-consuming endeavor. Catching 20 fish in a single day was considered lucky, and empty-handed trips were common. In this world, fishing was even harder, demanding far more patience. For most ordinary people, fishing was hardly a path to riches. The fact that Miao Zhuang still hadn't caught a single fish spoke volumes about the difficulty. When Miao Xian yanked his line again, reeling in a rarely seen toad, Miao Zhuang's eyes nearly popped out of his skull, his face a mask of utter disbelief. Damn this rotten luck. Did your ancestors' graves erupt with good fortune or what? Miao Zhuang couldn't hold back his curses, his composure had shattered completely. The crowd erupted into chaos, every onlooker gaping as if witnessing something utterly inconceivable. Another one already? That's the second spirit insect. Is this kid the love child of Lady Luck herself? Toad-type spirit insects barely show up once in 10 days, and he gets one on his second cast. Look at that crystal-clear body, red as blood, that's a first-grade blood amber toad. It's a key ingredient for refining moon-devouring goo, worth a fortune. TSK. Blood amber toads are practically the most valuable among first-grade spirit insects and fish. Unless Miao Zhuang pulls out a second-grade spirit fish, he's going to lose to this kid today, and his reputation will be ruined. The crowd buzzed with chatter, voices overlapping in excitement. Many who were preparing to refine moon-devouring goo couldn't hide their eagerness, already planning to negotiate for the blood amber toad as soon as the bet concluded. Miao Zhuang took a deep breath, forcing down his rising panic. Gritting his teeth, he seemed to make a difficult decision. Finally, he pulled out an unknown substance from his insect pouch and dumped the entire contents into the river. Then he sat back down, his expression sharper than ever, as if he'd just played his trump card. Miao Zhuang's strange behavior caught Miao Xian's attention, and he glanced over curiously. What did he just throw into the water? Bait? Miao Xian murmured under his breath. Unable to make sense of it, he shrugged and refocused on his own fishing rod. Whatever Miao Zhuang had scattered into the river seemed to work. This time, a fish bit in less than an incense stick's time, and it was Miao Zhuang who hooked it first. With a mighty heave, his muscular arms bulging, he yanked a plump, crimson-scaled fish from the water, sending it crashing onto the shore. Miao Zhuang's dark expression instantly brightened, his laughter bordering on hysterical. Ha ha ha, a bloodfin carp. The best for replenishing vitality. Bloodfin carp is a second-grade spirit fish, there's no way your flimsy rod can handle one of those. Unless you hook a second-grade spirit fish yourself, you've already lost. Why keep struggling? Just admit defeat already. Ha ha ha. He shot Miao Xian a taunting look, his earlier tension completely gone, replaced by triumphant glee. He was certain victory was his. But his celebration was premature. Just as his laughter reached its peak, Miao Xian's line twitched. Without hesitation, Miao Xian yanked hard, sending his third catch flying out of the water. Perhaps he'd overestimated the fish's resistance, the force of his pull sent it soaring high into the air. The sudden sight of the airborne fish made Miao Zhuang's heart lurch, but when he saw what it was, relief washed over him. Of course. That worthless rod couldn't possibly land a high-grade spirit fish. This time, it was yet another pitiful mortal fish. His laughter grew even louder. Ha ha ha, another mortal fish? I told you, you'd never. But his gloating was cut short. His eyes widened in stunned disbelief as the small white fish, still midair, was suddenly snapped up by a second-grade spirit fish that burst from the water. Whether by sheer clumsiness or miscalculation, the predator overshot its leap, landing perfectly on the shore. After a few feeble flops, Miao Xian promptly knocked it unconscious with a well-aimed rock. What the actual hell? Are you fucking kidding me? Miao Zhuang shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage, his eyes nearly bursting from their sockets. Chapter 12, The Fishing Rod Claimed. Not just him, everyone on the shore was stunned, their collective gasp cutting through the air like a sharpened hail. No way. How is this even possible? This can't be real. What kind of once-in-a-millennium luck is this? It's practically heaven-defying. Are you kidding me? He actually caught a second-grade spirit fish with a tree branch. Am I seeing things? TSK, a shield fish, even one of those is rare to catch in a whole month. Its scales can be forged into armor or shields, far more valuable than a bloodfin carp. There's no way Miao Zhuang can top this now. Amid the exclamations, Miao Zhuang's face darkened like iron, his stubborn refusal to concede driving him to cast his line back into the river center. The agreed-upon half-hour limit for their bet was nearly up. When your opponent is blessed by fortune, their luck becomes your curse. Miao Zhuang never got his second bite. The time ran out. He shot to his feet in a burst of frustrated energy, hurling his fishing rod to the ground with a violent clatter. What the hell just happened? This isn't real. He clutched his head in agony, fingers digging into his scalp. This was a guaranteed win. How did I lose? He felt like vomiting blood, as if the sky itself had collapsed on him. The crowd watched him with pitying eyes. No one had expected this outcome, not in their wildest dreams. A seasoned angler wielding a second-grade fishing rod, losing to a complete novice who didn't even have a proper rod. Who could have predicted that? Even now, they still couldn't believe it. This defied all logic. Heh. Well fought, well fought. Old friend, about those 100 spirit stones. Miao Xian rose to his feet with a faint smile, testing the waters with his words. Relax, I'm a man of my word, I've never welched on a bet in my life. 100 spirit stones. I can take the loss. Miao Zhuang shot him a glare sharp enough to draw blood, then yanked 100 stones from his storage pouch and flung them to the ground before storming off, too humiliated to show his face any longer. Miao Xian strode over, scooping up the scattered stones with a grin before turning to the crowd. Now selling, 1 blood scythe leech, 1 blood amber toad, and 1 shield fish. Any takers? Before his words even settled, over a dozen hands shot up, voices clamoring. Me. 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 I'll give you 4 spirit stones for the leech. 7 for the toad, deal. Kid, sell me that shield fish. 40 stones, I'll pay 40. The cacophony of bids made Miao Xian's heart sink slightly. First-grade spirit insects were still too cheap, even rare ones barely fetched double digits. If he wanted real profit from fishing, high-grade catches were non-negotiable. After some haggling, the leech sold for 5 stones, the toad for 8.5, and the shieldfish for 43. Total take, 56.5 stones. Combined with Miao Zhuang's 100, that made 156. Adding his original 140 savings brought him to 296. More than enough for that 240-stone rare metal fishing rod. A satisfied smile spread across Miao Xian's face as he marched to the young vendor's stall and slammed down the payment. Count it. The boy barely glanced at the pile before sweeping it into his storage pouch, as if trusting Miao Xian implicitly. Big bro, you're a legend. I bow to you. This humble Miao Huijing kowtows, can you share your fishing secrets? He presented the rod with both hands, gaze worshipful as if beholding a deity. Clearly, the boy had witnessed Miao Xian's miraculous performance and become an instant fan. Uncomfortable under the fervent stare, Miao Xian shook his head with a wry chuckle. Look at my clumsy casting, doesn't that prove I'm a total amateur? This win was pure luck. Well, that and good bait. His finger suddenly jabbed toward the scruffy stall owner nearby, a mischievous glint in his eye. See that disheveled uncle? I bought all my bait from him. 1 spirit stone proportion. Pricey, but you get what you pay for, premium bait makes all the difference. Think about it, why could I catch fish with just a branch? During the match, we were sitting close, so why did every fish bite my hook instead of his fancy second-grade one? Simple, my bait was irresistible. His casual remarks sent subtle ripples through the crowd. One by one, expressions cleared as if they'd uncovered some grand truth. So that's it. No wonder that shoddy rod worked, special bait. Makes sense now. It was the bait all along, that guy's hiding secrets. Brothers, charge. In an instant, a swarm of eager goo masters descended upon the previously ignored stall, packing it shoulder to shoulder. The disheveled vendor stood frozen in shock. Satisfied at the diverted attention, Miao Xian gave a small nod. Don't even look, you're too late to grab any now. Got any fish pouches? Give me the cheapest one. Realizing he'd need storage for future catches, he decided to buy a basic holding bag. Reluctantly tearing his gaze from the frenzy, Miao Huijing tossed over a worn blue pouch. Got this second-hand fish pouch lying around. Small capacity, holds about 30 fish max. For you, big bro, I'll cut a deal. 50 stones, no less. Miao Xian's eye twitched at the price. Not because it was expensive, 50 stones for spatial storage was downright generous. But with only 56.5 stones left to his name. Damn. Buying this would leave him with 6.5. Back to square one, flat broke again. Fine, deal. Gritting his teeth, he counted out 50 stones and grabbed the pouch, hurrying off without another word. He had no intention of fishing here further, too many eyes. If he landed another extraordinary catch, the commotion might attract trouble. Better to find some quiet, secluded spot and make his fortune unnoticed. Even if the spot had lower yields, he trusted his luck to break through any obstacle. Chapter 14, The Birth of the Ember Gu, Illustrated. Miao Xian's eyes remained fixed on the Gu vessel as he suddenly gritted his teeth and drew a sharp blade across his palm, splitting the flesh in a deep, searing gash. Blood welled up instantly, dripping in thick rivulets. Suppressing the agony, he pressed his bleeding hand firmly against the lid of the Gu vessel. The crimson liquid seeped through the cracks, trickling steadily into the vessel below. The spirit insects inside seemed to catch the scent of blood, their movements growing frenzied, their tiny bodies writhing with sudden, savage energy. Then, the slaughter began. One by one, they turned on each other, their instincts sharpened to a murderous edge. Before long, the Gu vessel trembled violently, the muffled sounds of battle echoing from within. Miao Xian's expression darkened, his hands clamping down on the lid with desperate strength, as though his very life depended on keeping whatever lurked inside from breaking free. Now, all he could do was wait. In time, the struggle within would end. The last surviving spirit insect would have a chance to metamorphose into a Gu, a creature of far greater power. The minutes dragged on. Miao Xian remained motionless, his palm pressed unwaveringly against the vessel, not daring to shift even slightly. As his blood continued to drain, the healthy flush in his cheeks faded, leaving his face ashen. A bitter thought crossed his mind, this isn't Gu refinement, it's life refinement. If blood sacrifice was the simplest method, what of those who offered their souls? Their lifespan? He didn't dare imagine. For the first time, he truly understood the cruelty of Gu refinement. In his current state, he could refine two at most, a third would be impossible. A person's blood was finite. How could anyone refine Gu endlessly through blood sacrifice? For the unlucky, half a year might pass without success. Just as Miao Xian felt his strength waning, the chaos within the vessel finally stilled. Relief washed over him. He yanked his hand away, hastily wrapping the wound with shaking fingers. His gaze locked onto the Gu vessel. Silence meant the battle was over. The victor, now in the throes of metamorphosis, would fall into a deep slumber, leaving the vessel eerily quiet. The refinement was complete. All that remained was to confirm whether the surviving insect had truly become a Gu. Success wasn't judged by visible changes, though transformation was inevitable, it took time. Some Gu shifted instantly, unrecognizable the moment the lid was lifted. Others took far longer. The surest indicator was aura. If the creature's presence had intensified beyond its original state, the refinement had succeeded. All that remained was to wait for its awakening. Heart pounding, Miao Xian flipped open the lid. There, in the center of the vessel, lay a grotesque, crimson toad, three-legged, with a shock of white fur atop its head. His breath hitched. The tension in his chest dissolved. It worked. His first Gu refinement had ended in success. A faint, involuntary smile tugged at his lips. So this is the Ember Gu. The legendary Gu, so difficult to refine that its recipe was nearly abandoned. They say no one has succeeded in 300 years, and yet, here it is. Seems easy enough. I pulled it off without a hitch. Miao Xian smirked, his tone dripping with false modesty. This was a high-grade Gu. Among the disciples, few could claim ownership of such a treasure. How could he not be thrilled? Still grinning, he reached into the vessel, carefully lifting the slumbering creature onto his palm. The warmth of its body against his skin only deepened his satisfaction. Had this Gu been purchased, blood binding would be necessary, lest it turn on its owner without warning. But a self-refined Gu required no such ritual. It had already drunk deeply of his blood during refinement, forging an unbreakable bond. Master and servant were irrevocably linked. Once awakened, it would obey his mental commands without question. The number and strength of Gu a master could control depended solely on their spiritual power. The greatest advantage of a self-refined Gu was its loyalty, its seamless harmony with its creator. Traded Gu, subjected to repeated blood bindings, grew fickle. Their loyalty wavered, their coordination suffered. Such flaws inevitably weakened their combat prowess. If given the choice, a Gu master would always prefer their own creations. Miao Xian had long resolved never to purchase another's Gu. He would rely solely on those he refined himself. Heh. A mere disciple, not even a Gu apprentice, yet I possess a high-grade Gu. If the others knew, they'd choke on envy. Among my peers, I'm already unmatched. Chuckling to himself, he stared at the ember Gu cradled in his palm, unable to tear his gaze away. A shame it's still so small. Fits right in my hand. Who knows how long it'll take to raise it to full size. The thought of Gu rearing wiped the smile from his face, replacing it with a grimace. In this world, refining Gu was hard, but raising them was harder. The cost of nurturing a Gu far exceeded that of creating one. He knew the basics. A Gu needed 3 things to grow. First, its master's blood, not in excess, but regularly. A Gu master's blood, rich with cultivated vitality, was potent nourishment. Each time a master advanced in rank, their blood underwent refinement, its essence growing stronger. A Gu that fed on such blood would experience a corresponding leap in power. Thus, even among low-grade Gu, those belonging to mid-stage apprentices far surpassed those of early-stage ones. An early-stage apprentice might need a mid-grade Gu to rival a mid-stage apprentice's low-grade one. Unless the weaker master possessed a Gu of significantly higher quality, surpassing one's rank was nearly impossible. Yet a master's blood was finite. No one could raise hundreds, or even dozens, of Gu. Quality mattered more than quantity. Most Gu masters carried fewer than 10. Chapter 15, Gu Sorcery. Blood is the source of a Gu insect's power, not merely sustenance to satisfy its hunger. Most Gu insects feed on various types of bugs. The ember Gu, for instance, is a toad, and a toad's diet consists overwhelmingly of insects. Spirit insects, however, are undeniably expensive, exorbitantly so. Just thinking about the market price of spirit insects made Miao Xian's head throb. He was likely raising a gluttonous monster that would eat him into utter destitution. But that wasn't all. Like their masters, Gu insects required daily absorption of spiritual energy from spirit stones to continuously replenish their internal reserves. Otherwise, where would the ember Gu draw the energy to spit fireballs? Naturally, it had to be replenished through spirit stones. Thus, vast quantities of spirit stones were the third necessity for a Gu insect's growth. Typically, a low-grade Gu insect required 1 spirit stone per day, while a mid-grade one needed 2. A high-grade Gu insect, however, demanded 4 spirit stones daily. And the ember Gu happened to be precisely such a high-grade Gu, consuming 4 spirit stones every single day. Miao Xian's headache intensified. He had no spirit stones left, he'd already gone bankrupt earlier that very day. A Gu master's blood, spirit insects, and spirit stones were all indispensable for a Gu insect's growth. Without either spirit insects or spirit stones, a Gu insect could not progress further. Thus, a high-quality Gu insect was nothing short of a money-burning machine, far beyond the means of ordinary people to sustain. Of course, one could always choose not to feed it. Most laborers and impoverished rogue cultivators opted for this route, providing their Gu insects only with mundane bugs, just enough to keep them alive, never bothering to nurture them into formidable fighters. For a destitute Gu master, funneling vast amounts of spirit stones into a Gu insect was an abysmal return on investment. It was far more cost-effective to use those stones to rapidly advance one's own cultivation, investing the resources in oneself rather than an external creature. Fully meeting a Gu insect's needs was a luxury reserved for the wealthy. For those Gu masters with abundant resources, after fully covering their daily cultivation expenses, they still had spirit stones to spare. Not using these excess stones to nurture their Gu insects would, in fact, be a waste. And so, Miao Xian found himself torn. Should he adopt the lifestyle of the poor, or that of the rich? The poor man's approach undoubtedly saved spirit stones, but the resulting Gu insect would be pathetically weak, easily crushed by prodigies who could leap realms in combat. Logically speaking, he was penniless, a true pauper, so there should be no hesitation. Yet, he had an obsessive streak. The thought of not raising his Gu insects to their strongest possible forms gnawed at him, leaving him deeply unsettled. Damn it. I'll go all out. I'm living the rich man's way. Gritting his teeth and clenching his fists, Miao Xian finally made up his mind. The Ember Gu's blood requirements were no concern, he was only raising one Gu insect, so he could easily supply enough. As for spirit insects, he could manage for a while. His silkworm nursery often had dead spirit silkworms, and feeding those to the Ember Gu would buy him time. Once his luck turned favorable, he would venture into the mountains. With fortune on his side, he was confident he could gather plenty of spirit insects, solving the food problem. But he'd have to be vigilant. If the Ember Gu escaped and devoured all the living silkworms in the nursery, it would be disastrous. As for the final issue, spirit stones, he already had a plan. Tomorrow, he would sell the 2 second-grade spirit fish. That should sustain him for a while. Besides, he'd hit a bottleneck in his cultivation and wouldn't need spirit stones for personal use anytime soon, eliminating any competition with the Ember Gu. All in all, it was just 4 spirit stones a day. He could handle it. Since he wouldn't be cultivating during this period, he might as well make use of the idle time. Starting tomorrow, he decided, he would go fishing. Fishing on non-lucky days was inefficient, but it would still earn him some spirit stones. Something was better than nothing, and it beat lying around at home. Combined with the income from fishing, fully supporting a high-grade Gu insect shouldn't be too difficult. Noticing the blue glow around him fade, reverting to the usual white, Miao Xian stopped fussing and carefully placed the Ember Gu into his breeding pouch. The night was deep, but his excitement hadn't waned. Sleep was the last thing on his mind. Instead, he opened his storage pouch and pulled out the 5 poison scripture, flipping straight to the final section. He had read this manual countless times, but the latter portion remained largely unexplored, it hadn't been relevant until now. The back of the 5 poison scripture contained Gu sorcery techniques tailored to the cultivation method. A cultivation method wasn't just about absorbing spiritual energy, it also had to possess offensive capabilities. No matter how strong a Gu insect was, it remained an external tool. A Gu master couldn't just raise powerful Gu insects, they themselves had to surpass their own creations in combat prowess. Otherwise, the profession was worthless. The Gu sorcery section of each cultivation method comprised the offensive techniques a Gu master would learn alongside their practice. Some methods even came with matching Gu recipes, explicitly stating on the title page, to master this art, one must refine a specific Gu insect. Because such Gu insects harmonized perfectly with the cultivation method, they often grew absurdly powerful. Most cultivation methods included at least one accompanying Gu sorcery technique per layer. The 5 poison scripture was no exception. The only pity was that Miao Xian possessed only the first layer of the 5 poison scripture. To learn the rest, he would have to perform great deeds for his clan. In the Miao family, all disciples received incomplete versions of their cultivation methods. On one hand, Gu novices only needed the first layer, the subsequent stages wouldn't be necessary for a long time. On the other, it was a measure to maintain secrecy. But this also meant he currently had access to only one Gu sorcery technique. With a dissatisfied sigh, Miao Xian turned to the Gu sorcery section and settled into his chair, studying intently. The technique attached to the first layer of the 5 poison scripture was called 5 Poisons Heart-Piercing Palm. Beneath the name, the first line boldly declared, to master this technique, one must refine the 5 poisons. Further down, the text elaborated. The 5 poisons referred to Gu insects of the scorpion, spider, centipede, toad, and venomous snake varieties. Each had to be lethally toxic, embodying one of the 5 elemental attributes, and be of no less than high-grade quality. Once mastered, the practitioner's palms would harden like iron, impervious to blades and spears, capable of seizing Gu insects barehanded. No matter how sharp a Gu insect's fangs, they would struggle to leave even a scratch on the practitioner's hands. Moreover, the palms would conceal deadly venom. Anyone struck by the 5 poisons heart-piercing palm would immediately bear a black, hand-shaped mark on their skin. The toxins would then invade the body, attacking the heart directly, subjecting the victim to excruciating, bone-deep agony. Once the 5 poisons assailed the heart, not even a deity could save them. Hence the name, 5 Poisons Heart-Piercing Palm. This Gu sorcery was ruthlessly domineering. Once mastered, the practitioner would fear no Gu insect in close combat. Chapter 16, The Fishing Prodigy. Miao Xian couldn't help but marvel inwardly, this was the fearsome Gu sorcery attached to the forbidden manual 5 poison scripture, truly terrifying. Yet, the moment he recalled the conditions for cultivating the 5 poisons heart-piercing palm, his heart sank with bitterness. He had skimmed through this forbidden technique long ago out of curiosity. But upon reading the line, "To master this art, one must first cultivate the 5 poisons," his enthusiasm instantly withered, and he lost all desire to continue flipping through the pages. 5 top-grade goo insects, how could they be so easily refined? Moreover, each of these goo insects had to possess one of the 5 elemental attributes, all while being lethally toxic. Finding top-grade goo recipes was already difficult enough, but with so many stringent conditions piled atop, the task seemed downright impossible. Back then, he truly hadn't believed he could gather all 5 required poisons within a short time, so he decisively abandoned the idea of learning the 5 poisons heart-piercing palm immediately. But today, his perspective had abruptly shifted. Hadn't it been mere moments? Yet a top-grade toad-class goo insect had been refined with shocking ease. Not only did this goo possess the fire attribute, one of the 5 elements, but it also harbored an exceptionally aggressive fire toxin within its body. For those struck by the ember goo's fireball, simply extinguishing the flames wouldn't be enough to save them. The fire toxin laced within the flames was vicious, victims would turn crimson, their body temperatures spiking uncontrollably. Without prompt detoxification, the afflicted would be burned alive by the toxin in a matter of moments. The ember goo wasn't just a fire attribute toad-class goo, its venom was ruthlessly potent. This perfectly fulfilled one of the requirements for cultivating the 5 poisons heart-piercing palm. What he had once considered a near-impossible task had, unexpectedly, been 1/5 completed in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, it dawned on him, in the face of heaven-defying luck, all difficulty became trivial. Mastering the 5 poisons heart-piercing palm didn't seem so daunting after all. So what if each poison had to embody a different elemental attribute? So what if they had to be 5 top-grade goo insects, each brimming with lethal venom? Gathering them all would be child's play, no challenge at all. This 5 poisons heart-piercing palm, he would master it. He couldn't wait to see just how formidable this notoriously difficult technique would be once fully cultivated. Overcome with excitement, Miao Xian slammed his palm onto the table with a resounding thud. Then, he picked up the 5 poison scripture once more, immersing himself in its pages with rapt attention, losing all sense of time and self. He was so engrossed that the hours slipped by unnoticed. Only when drowsiness crashed over him like a wave did he snap back to awareness. Lifting his head to glance out the window, he realized how late it had grown before reluctantly setting the manual aside. Though the section on goo sorcery was lengthy, he had already read it cover to cover multiple times in a single night. But with the 5 top-grade goo insects still uncollected, he had no choice but to suppress his itching hands and wait until the full set was gathered before practicing the technique. Yawning, Miao Xian finally surrendered to his exhaustion. He strode to the bed, kicked off his shoes, and within moments, sank into deep slumber. In the days that followed, Miao Xian abandoned cultivation. Rising early each morning, he fed all the spirit silkworms before immediately heading to the riverbank to fish, often staying there from dawn till dusk. Gradually, the regulars who fished along the phantomless ghost river grew familiar with his face. He didn't return to that secluded stretch of river where he'd fished before. Only a fool would stubbornly haunt an unlucky spot when fortune had turned its back. Instead, he boldly chose the most crowded sections of the river each day. Of course, without the blessing of a lucky day, his daily hauls were pitifully meager. The vast majority of his catches were mundane fish, with only a scant few spirit fish among them. On the rare occasion he hooked a spirit fish, it was usually the cheapest variety, fetching just 1 or 2 spirit stones at most. After a grueling day's work, deducting the cost of bait, his profits barely amounted to 7 or 8 spirit stones. He never replicated the dazzling success of that bet with Miao Zhuang. Over time, everyone concluded his victory had been pure luck, and their interest in him faded. Naturally, this was exactly what Miao Xian wanted. Still, among some, he earned the nickname, Fishing Prodigy. Though he fished on days of white tier fortune, he was, after all, a child of destiny. Even within the same tier, his white aura shone far brighter than others. The more radiant the white light, the stronger the fortune, and the wider the gap between him and the rest. Every day, without fail, he reeled in more fish than anyone around him. On occasions when his white aura's brilliance neared the intensity of green tier fortune, he'd even accidentally hook a second-grade plumpfish, drawing gasps and exclamations from the onlookers. Under the influence of this luck, he consistently earned 7 or 8 spirit stones daily from fishing. Others considered themselves fortunate to scrape together 3 or 4. Here, returning empty-handed was the norm for many. Given how much envy Miao Xian's daily earnings provoked, it was no surprise he'd been dubbed the fishing prodigy. Leisurely days slipped by like a fleeting steed. Before he knew it, over half a month had passed. On this day, Miao Xian stared glumly at his own body, still radiating a white glow. More than 20 days had gone by without a single stroke of good fortune. Luck was fickle like that, sometimes arriving multiple times a month, other times withholding its favor entirely. With tomorrow being the day the thin-faced overseer inspected the silkworm chambers, and still no sign of good luck, anxiety gnawed at him. Preoccupied with fishing by the river all month, he'd neglected the silkworm chambers. This month's harvest was even worse than the last. Not only had he produced only 51 second-grade spirit silkworms, but 25 first-grade ones had also sickened and died. Both key quotas had been woefully unmet. The target of 9,000 cocoons had been barely scraped. He'd gathered 9,100, technically exceeding the requirement. Yet this was no cause for pride. Learning that other silkworm chambers routinely surpassed 10,000 cocoons monthly only hammered home his own inadequacy. Chapter 17, Breakthrough. Damn it, why hasn't it appeared yet? Why hasn't it appeared yet? If it doesn't show up now, I'm truly done for. Clasping his hands behind his back, Miao Xian paced frantically across the room, his footsteps echoing his agitation. Just as he was on the verge of losing his mind, as if the heavens had finally heard his desperate plea, a brilliant violet light suddenly erupted across his skin. At that moment, Miao Xian had never seen purple as so breathtakingly beautiful. Ha ha ha. Violeteer fortune. The heavens refuse to let me perish. With a burst of laughter, he dashed out the door at top speed. The large cauldron in the center of the courtyard had long been kept boiling. To avoid wasting precious moments of good fortune on heating water, he had maintained it at a near constant simmer all day. Rushing to the cauldron, he swiftly scattered a packet of purple powder into the bubbling water, then dumped in all the prepared spirit cocoons without missing a beat, his movements fluid and precise. After that, he paid no further attention to the cauldron's contents. There was no need to watch. Under the influence of violeteer fortune, every single one of these 100 spirit silkworms would metamorphose flawlessly, without a single mishap. He had far more critical matters to attend to. And that critical matter, naturally, was his breakthrough. With violeteer fortune upon him, if he didn't seize this moment to advance, when else would he? He had always planned conservatively. There was no way he would fail attempting a breakthrough under fourth-tier fortune. As for the silkworm boiling, it could wait. It didn't require his immediate attention. The breakthrough and the silkworm boiling weren't mutually exclusive, both tasks could proceed simultaneously. This wasn't a world of immortal cultivation, where breakthroughs took decades. Boiling the silkworms required only the time it took an incense stick to burn, and his breakthrough would take even less. He could easily complete his advancement within that window. Time was of the essence. Miao Xian didn't dare delay. Quickly retrieving 5 jade vials from his storage pouch, he hesitated briefly, a flicker of fear crossing his gaze before his expression hardened with resolve. Tipping his head back, he downed all 5 vials' contents in one go. Then, dropping into a cross-legged position on the spot, he closed his eyes, silently circulating his cultivation technique as he plunged into the breakthrough state. The liquids within those 5 vials were none other than the 5 poisons required for cultivating the 5 poison scripture. In this world, the 5 poisons differed from those of his past life. Here, they were snake, scorpion, centipede, toad, and spider. To master the 5 poison scripture, one had to temper the body using the venom of these 5 goo insects. Each breakthrough demanded the ingestion of higher-grade poisons, leveraging their lethal force to shatter cultivation barriers. This process was perilous beyond measure, precisely why the manual warned of a 10% mortality rate. If the body could adapt to the toxins during this ordeal, developing immunity to the 5 poisons, then subsequent tempering with the same poisons would yield results far surpassing those of other cultivation methods. But if the body failed to adapt, death was the only outcome. The 5 poisons in these vials hadn't been collected by him, they were the original owner's stockpile. Had the previous owner not possessed them, he wouldn't have met his untimely end. What you left unfinished, I shall complete for you. Watch as I conquer these 5 poisons. Miao Xian growled through clenched teeth. No sooner had the words left his mouth than his face, hands, and every patch of exposed skin turned an inky black, the virulent toxin spreading through his body at terrifying speed. A grimace of agony twisted his features as a pained groan escaped his throat. Clearly, the sensation of being saturated with lethal poison was far from pleasant. The 5 toxins rampaged through his meridians, each wave of torment towing the line between death and euphoria. Multiple times, the pain nearly overwhelmed him, threatening to drag him into unconsciousness, but he gritted his teeth, clinging to awareness through sheer force of will. He didn't know what would happen if he passed out, perhaps reduced chances of success, perhaps instant death. Either outcome was unacceptable. How could he dare faint? Fortunately, a Gu master's breakthrough didn't drag on for years or decades like an immortal cultivator's. Before even half an incense stick had burned, Miao Xian sensed his aura intensifying, the excruciating, soul-rending pain gradually receding like a tide. By now, he was drenched in sweat, his robes clinging to him like a second skin, as if he'd been pulled from a river. Testing his strength, he clenched a fist, the crisp pop of knuckles echoing unexpectedly loud in the quiet room. Did I succeed? Is this the power of the early Gu child stage? A spark of exhilaration flashed in his eyes as he sprang to his feet. But there was no time to revel in his triumph, nor to wash off the grime. The moment he stood, his gaze snagged on the simmering cauldron of silkworms, instantly hijacking his attention. Any joy over his breakthrough was forgotten. The cocoons should be ready. I wonder what mutated strain will emerge this time. Working swiftly, he fished out all the cocoons, transferring them to a rearing box nearby, his eyes alight with anticipation. He didn't have to wait long. One by one, the spirit silkworms began emerging from their cocoons. Just as he predicted, every single one was a second-grade spirit silkworm, save for a lone exception. Slowly, Miao Xian's focus shifted to the last remaining cocoon, still motionless. Drawing from past experience, he remained calm, certain this one harbored something extraordinary, and his expression grew expectant. True to his hopes, the final cocoon soon trembled before a gray-hued silkworm pushed through the silk, peering out at the world with what seemed like genuine curiosity. The moment Miao Xian saw it, his breath hitched, his pulse quickening. A void silkworm. I actually bred a void silkworm. Ha ha ha. I'm going to be rich. His elation bordered on delirium. The void silkworm was an exceptionally rare strain, its silk thrummed with spatial energy, making it ideal for crafting storage artifacts. Storage pouches, insect-rearing bags, fish-keeping sacks, spirit beast satchels, all could be woven from void silkworm silk. Its value was self-evident. While spirit insects were generally considered mere materials for Gu refinement, and thus not highly prized, exceptions existed for everything. The void silkworm was such an exception. Despite being only a first-grade spirit insect, its worth surpassed that of most Gu insects. The silk it produced could generate endless wealth, enough to purchase multiple Gu insects without a second thought. Who wouldn't go mad over such a treasure? Gradually regaining his composure, Miao Xian pondered how to handle this void silkworm. Handing it over to the clan was out of the question. Sure, submitting this mutated strain might earn him another top-grade Gu recipe, allowing him to swiftly acquire a second premium Gu insect. But the problem was obvious, submitting one mutated strain so soon after the last would practically scream that something was amiss. A single mutated strain could be dismissed as luck. Multiple in quick succession. No amount of luck could explain that away. Chapter 18, Market Treasure Hunt. Only two options lay before him. He could either sell this void silkworm for a substantial sum of spirit stones, ensuring his cultivation resources would be worry-free for the foreseeable future. Or he could keep and raise the void silkworm himself. He had long planned to nurture a mutated silkworm as a pet, though he hadn't yet decided on which breed to choose. The varieties of mutated silkworms were overwhelming, each more dazzling than the last. Every one of them possessed miraculous abilities, and the silk they spun was extraordinarily valuable, capable of generating endless wealth for their owner. Raising any mutated silkworm was akin to owning a golden goose. Who wouldn't be enticed? If he truly kept this void silkworm, he could regularly visit the market to sell its silk. It would be a steady source of income, greatly alleviating his resource shortages. Yet, hesitation gnawed at him. The risks made him weigh the decision carefully. He had to admit his silkworm raising skills were abysmal. He often ended up killing spirit silkworms by accident. What if he accidentally killed this void silkworm? All his hopes would vanish like water through a sieve. He had no idea how to care for a void silkworm, what it ate, how to enhance its quality. If he couldn't nurture it to second or third grade, the silk from a mere first-grade void silkworm would be of limited value. His family had never taught him how to upgrade mutated silkworms. Every time second-grade spirit silkworms or mutated breeds were cultivated in the silkworm chambers, the family would collect them all and hand them over to their expert silkworm raisers for further nurturing. At his current status, he had no access to the advanced cultivation methods for high-grade spirit silkworms. After a long deliberation, Miao Xian finally clenched his fist, his mind made up. There was no need to agonize over this, mutated silkworms weren't a one-time opportunity for him. Producing mutated breeds was as easy as eating or drinking, soon, he'd have a second, a third. In that case, what harm was there in selling one? He could postpone raising a mutated silkworm himself until he'd gained more experience and learned how to upgrade them. At the very least, he needed to ensure he wouldn't accidentally kill the precious breeds, otherwise, he'd be devastated. This time, he had successfully stewed a batch of second-grade spirit silkworms, fulfilling his monthly quota of 100. A weight lifted from his shoulders, and he finally felt at ease. Now, all he needed was to trade the second-grade silkworms with other silkworm attendants for a large number of first-grade ones, making up for the losses. Tomorrow's inspection would no longer be a concern. Miao Xian's eyes gleamed as he carefully cradled the void silkworm, afraid of crushing the delicate creature. Without pausing to admire it, he gently placed it into his insect pouch. Then, he hurriedly gathered his belongings and rushed out the door. His urgency stemmed from the purple aura still lingering around him. This time, it seemed the lucky streak would last much longer. Time was precious, he couldn't afford to waste a single moment. He had to act swiftly, making the most of this purple fortune while it lasted. Since it wouldn't endure forever, he decisively abandoned time-consuming activities like fishing. Without further deliberation, he resolved to use this stroke of luck for a treasure hunt at the mountain market. He had long considered visiting the market on a lucky day, and now, under the influence of this purple fortune, he was sure to return with a haul of treasures. Another reason for his swift decision was his eagerness to sell the void silkworm. Miao Xian couldn't afford to delay, he feared he might kill it by the next day. His confidence in his silkworm-raising skills was non-existent. This time, he moved with such haste that he sprinted down the mountain, reaching the market in less than the time it took an incense stick to burn. Only then did he realize just how monstrous his physique had become after the 5 poisons body tempering. Despite running at full speed for so long, he was barely winded, almost inhuman. And this was despite him being only at the early Gu child stage, the lowest realm of a Gu master. Perhaps the purple fortune was at work, for the moment he arrived, his eyes locked onto the very treasure he needed most. What he urgently required was a personal insect pouch, the one at his waist was borrowed from his family, and owning his own was a pressing matter. Miao Xian strode forward, a flicker of anticipation in his heart. Something told him this stall held more than met the eye. While insect pouches weren't rare, they could be bought at any shop for spirit stones. Since fate had guided him here, there must be something special about this place. The stall owner was an elderly man, his hunched frame exuding a sly demeanor, his cultivation at the mid-Gu child stage. Despite his age, his realm was unremarkable. Such was the fate of rogue cultivators, lacking resources and proper techniques, they groped blindly in their cultivation, often straying down dead ends. No matter how low their realm, it was hardly surprising. Seeing the stall owner's modest strength, Miao Xian felt no restraint and swiftly scanned the displayed wares. Only 3 insect pouches lay on the stall, each labeled with price and details. All 3 were small-sized, priced at a little over 100 spirit stones. A twinge of disappointment pricked at Miao Xian. This old man's craftsmanship seemed mediocre. After all these years, he could only produce small insect pouches. What a waste of time. Small pouches had barely enough space for a wash basin, why would fate lead him here? Doubt crept into his mind. Young friend, you may call me stallkeeper Wang. None of these catch your eye? Wang's face crinkled into a knowing smile before he continued. No matter. You can also place a custom order, this stall takes commissions. Miao Xian's interest piqued. How does a custom order work? Seeing his curiosity, Wang's grin widened. This old man specializes in crafting insect pouches. I can make one to your specifications on the spot. Design, color, all customizable. If you want a larger pouch, consider embedding a void stone inside. Void stones expand the pouch's space, though the exact size is unpredictable. With luck, the space could be larger than a house. With bad luck, it might only fit a fist, a waste of a void stone, given their price. So, do you have the courage to gamble? Wang chuckled, pulling out a milky white stone from his storage pouch with a mysterious air. At those words, Miao Xian's eyes blazed with excitement, almost frighteningly so. Unpredictability. Perfect. He loved unpredictability. Chapter 19, The Thrilled Wanling. How much does the void stone cost? Miao Xian suppressed his excitement and hurriedly asked. 300 spirit stones, plus the crafting fee and other materials, totaling 450 spirit stones, stallkeeper Wang replied with a sly grin, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Don't think it's expensive, void stones possess spatial properties, and 300 is already a steal. If you're lucky, the void stone might expand the insect pouch to the size of a large one. Then you'd really hit the jackpot. Miao Xian smirked faintly, seeing right through the old man's ploy. He deliberately avoided mentioning the success rate, trying to dangle an illusion of profit. No doubt, the chance of expanding the pouch to a large size was pitifully low, negligible, even. Otherwise, void stones wouldn't be sold so cheaply. A large insect pouch could easily fetch tens of thousands of spirit stones. If expanding one with a void stone were truly that simple, this old man would be bankrupt by now, selling them for a mere 300. Miao Xian understood perfectly but chose not to expose him. He had no time to haggle. Fine, but payment upon delivery. How long will it take? Of course, he didn't have 450 spirit stones on him. Though he'd fished for over 20 days with considerable gains, he had a glutton at home to feed. Aside from satisfying the ash goose appetite, he also needed to reserve spirit fish for body tempering. As a result, he was now penniless, not a single spirit stone left. His plan was to rush to Wan's treasure exchange and sell the void silkworm while the old man crafted the pouch. A void silkworm's value would undoubtedly fetch over 400 spirit stones. Selling it to Wan Ling would also repay the favor for the storage bag he'd gifted last time. Seeing Miao Xian agree to embed the void stone, stallkeeper Wang's lips curled into a barely noticeable smirk. It was true that void stones could expand a pouch's space, sometimes significantly. He hadn't lied. But the success rate was abysmal. Most expansions resulted in pitifully small spaces. Achieving a large insect pouch's capacity with a void stone required ancestors' graves to be spewing smoke from good fortune. Frankly, in all his years, he'd never seen anyone succeed. Only a fool would spend 300 spirit stones gambling on such ludicrous odds. Young friend, such boldness. Rest assured, I'll put my heart into crafting this pouch, no cutting corners. As for the time, if your requirements aren't too complex, it'll take just the time an incense stick takes to burn. Don't let my age fool you, my hands are swift. Without speed, I wouldn't offer on-the-spot crafting, heh. Miao Xian nodded. Then start now. I'll browse elsewhere. You'll get your spirit stones once it's done. Remember, no other customers, no queue jumping. My time is precious. If you miss the deadline, I walk away. Stallkeeper Wang blinked, then chuckled. Naturally, first come, first served, I understand. But you're not staying to supervise? Trusting my integrity so easily? What if I swap your pouch? Miao Xian scoffed. We're strangers, of course I don't trust you. Don't worry, I'll return before you finish. If I spot any tricks, you won't get a single stone. As for the pouch's design, the shabbier, the better. Add some patches, make it look worthless. Simple enough, I trust it won't delay you. Without another word, Miao Xian turned and strode toward Wan's treasure exchange. Stallkeeper Wang stared blankly at his retreating figure, utterly baffled. Good heavens, in all my years, I've never heard such a bizarre request. The world truly has all kinds of characters. Miao Xian moved swiftly, soon arriving at Wan's treasure exchange. Before he could step inside, Wan Ling greeted him with a beaming smile. I wondered why magpies were singing today, it's you gracing my shop again. So, selling spirit fish or silkworms this time? Miao Xian skipped the pleasantries, leaning in to whisper directly into Wan Ling's ear. I'm in a hurry. A first-grade void silkworm, name your price. His voice was softer than a mosquito's hum, barely audible. Wan Ling's pupils contracted sharply, a flash of uncontrollable delight crossing his eyes before he urgently hissed. Inside, now. Grabbing Miao Xian's arm with barely contained excitement, he pulled him into the shop and shut the door behind them. It seemed business was suspended for the time being. Just name the price. Miao Xian glanced at the lingering purple aura around him and pressed again. Recognizing his urgency, Wan Ling cut to the chase. 700 spirit stones, final offer. That's absolutely fair. Even the strongest mid-grade goo insects rarely fetch 700. This price is more than generous. The void silkworm is rare, yes, but it's still only first grade, the lowest tier. Miao Xian nodded. He wasn't well versed in mutated silkworm market values, but he trusted Wan Ling's integrity, hence his repeated patronage. Deal. Here's the void silkworm, take it. Carefully, he retrieved the silkworm from his insect pouch and laid it on his left palm. At the sight of the grayish creature, Wan Ling's eyes glazed over, transfixed. Good, good, it really is a void silkworm. To think you bred something this rare, how on earth did you manage it? Wan Ling accepted it with both hands as if cradling a priceless treasure. Quit gawking, it won't vanish. Hurry up with the spirit stones, I'm in a rush. Seeing Wan Ling still mesmerized, Miao Xian nudged him and handed over a storage bag. Ah. Right. Here you go. Snapping out of his daze, Wan Ling swiftly transferred 700 spirit stones from his own pouch. 700 was no small sum, yet he completed the transfer in mere seconds, somehow. You've done me a huge favor today, my friend. With this void silkworm, this month's sales quota isn't just met, it's smashed. Completing a void silkworm trade is a major merit, enough to earn a high-grade goo recipe from the family. All thanks to you. Next time we meet, I might just have a high-grade goo insect ready. Don't be too envious, haha. Chuckling, Wan Ling handed back the filled storage bag, his eyes brimming with smug pride. Miao Xian couldn't help but roll his eyes. A mere high-grade goo insect. He already had one, had he ever bragged about it? Wan Ling had picked the wrong person to show off to. Chapter 20, Continuing the Stroll. Congratulations in advance, may you refine a premium goo insect in a single attempt. Miao Xian accepted the storage pouch without meticulously counting the spirit stones inside, merely giving its contents a cursory glance before fastening it to his waist. You're laying it on a bit thick. How could someone like me possibly succeed in a single attempt? Only beasts pull off such feats, I'm nowhere near that level. At Wan Ling's words, Miao Xian's expression shifted slightly. He said nothing more and hurriedly left the Wan clan treasure pavilion. Watching Miao Xian's retreating figure, Wan Ling could no longer restrain himself and burst into uproarious laughter. Ha ha ha. Who knew I'd stumble upon such luck? That Li Yang is a complete fool. To think he'd push such a lucrative customer straight into my hands. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Ha ha ha. Across the way, Li Yang's face darkened instantly upon hearing Wan Ling's unrestrained laughter. What in the world did that brat trade to Wan Ling to get him so worked up? Narrowing his eyes, Li Yang felt a sudden surge of foreboding. Then his eyes flew wide open, his features twisting into a snarl. Damn it! It's mutated silkworm eggs. If that guy had traded Wan Ling a batch of second-grade spirit silkworms, he'd have made sure I accidentally saw it. But if he shut the door to keep me from seeing, then it's definitely high-value mutated silkworm eggs. Damn it all. Furious, Li Yang slammed his palm onto the table with unrestrained force, instantly cracking the surface. Damn it. Damn it all. This should have been mine. That Wan Ling stole my golden opportunity. Seething, Li Yang stomped and roared in rage. Leaving the Wan clan treasure pavilion, Miao Xian headed straight for the stall selling insect-rearing pouches. The trade for the void silkworms hadn't taken much time, only the round trip had eaten into his schedule. Still, he managed to return before the stall owner, old Wang, finished crafting the pouch. Seeing the man meticulously working on the pouch, Miao Xian quietly exhaled in relief. Given the time still needed, Miao Xian decided to browse nearby stalls, determined to make the most of his lingering purple fortune. He didn't dare stray too far from the old man, keeping him firmly in sight. What if the crafty old coot realized he'd accidentally made a large insect-rearing pouch and decided to swap it out for a lesser one? Such a risk couldn't be ignored. Given what he'd observed, this shrewd old man was absolutely capable of such treachery. With his movements restricted, Miao Xian's options were limited. After a quick survey, he stopped at a stall displaying 3 gray stones of varying sizes. His heart leaped, this was another moment for his purple fortune to shine. Though his knowledge of this world's treasures was lacking, he recognized these stones. Just like in his previous life, this world would eventually enter an ice age. During that era, temperatures would plummet, ice sheets would engulf land and sea, and countless lifeforms would perish en masse. The earth would plunge into eternal winter, with innumerable species facing extinction. To survive, certain spirit insects would burrow deep underground, encasing themselves in thick stone cocoons to endure the cold, slumbering for countless epochs. Only when disturbed would they awaken, slowly breaking free from their rocky prisons to see daylight once more. For those lucky enough to find these stones, fortune could strike overnight. No one knew what kind of insect might lie hidden within. If it turned out to be a rare species or an ancient variant long thought extinct, the discoverer would strike it rich. Hence, some chose to sell these grey stones at stalls. After all, not all insects survived the Ice Age. Most perished within their stone shells, becoming fossils of bizarre shapes. Fewer than 1 in 100 emerged alive. Rather than gamble on those slim odds, sellers offloaded the risk, ensuring at least a guaranteed profit. Thus, the thriving stone gambling trade was born. Some struck gold overnight, the envy of all, while others lost everything, reduced to laughingstocks. No one could reliably discern whether a stone held living insects or dead ones, it was pure luck. And today, Miao Xian's luck was at its peak. Rubbing his hands in excitement, he marveled at this world's novel gambling scene. With his purple fortune, he was certain he'd unearth an exceptionally rare spirit insect and strike another windfall. Pushing through the crowd, he squeezed to the front and called out, "Elder, how much for these 3 stones?" This stall's owner was also an old man, but his kindly demeanor inspired instant goodwill. The seated elder looked up slowly, smiling as he replied, 50 spirit stones for the small one, 100 for the medium, 200 for the large, no haggling." Miao Xian couldn't help but wince at the prices. Had he not just made a hefty profit, he'd have turned on his heel right then. The prices weren't just steep, they were outrageous. Now he understood why so many gathered here, yet none made purchases. "Elder, isn't this too expensive? Most of these stones contain dead insects. Finding even one live insect in 10 is considered lucky. Chances are I'll lose out buying this. How can you justify such prices?" Miao Xian frowned, unable to hold back his complaint. The old man chuckled, shaking his head. "Young man, you're mistaken. While most stones hold dead insects, there's always the chance of uncovering a rare species. Rarity dictates value. If you unearth a long-extinct variant, your gains would be immense. At that point, I'd be the one filled with regret and mockery. So the price must stay high, otherwise, I'd rather not sell." Hearing this, Miao Xian knew bargaining was hopeless. Gritting his teeth, he slowly reached into his storage pouch, withdrew 50 spirit stones, and placed them on the stall with visible reluctance. "I'll take the smallest stone. Here's 50, count them." Chapter 21, First Battle. As he spoke, Miao Xian carefully lifted the smallest grey stone from the stall with both hands. Though it was the smallest of the 3, the stone was still larger than an adult's head and surprisingly heavy. With the first deal successfully made, the old man beamed as he swiftly collected all 50 spirit stones, then looked up at Miao Xian and tentatively asked, "Will you open the stone here in public, or take it away?" The crowd lingering around the stall had noticeably grown, their eager eyes fixed on Miao Xian, shimmering with anticipation. Spectating was human nature, and stone gambling, with its thrilling unpredictability, was the most exciting spectacle of all. The onlookers naturally hoped Miao Xian would open the stone right then, satisfying their curiosity. Yet they were destined for disappointment. Confident in the stone he had chosen during his peak fortune, Miao Xian was certain it held something valuable. A firm believer in discretion, he knew better than to flaunt wealth. With such a high-quality spirit insect likely inside, he dared not reveal it publicly and promptly refused, "No. I wouldn't want to make you regret this too much, I'll take it with me." With that, he stowed the heavy stone into his insect-rearing pouch and turned to leave without another glance. The crowd behind him sighed in disappointment, shaking their heads as they gradually dispersed. The old man, too, watched Miao Xian's retreating figure and exhaled quietly, as if relieved he hadn't uncovered a rare insect in public. Leaving the grey stone stall, Miao Xian quickened his pace toward old Wang, who was still crafting the insect-rearing pouch. By the time he arrived, the pouch was nearly finished, and as Miao Xian stopped before the stall, old Wang sewed the final stitch. "Perfect timing, I just finished the pouch as you arrived." Old Wang grinned, casually tossing the pouch toward Miao Xian. "Here, go ahead and bind it with your blood. Let's see just how big the spatial capacity is." Miao Xian caught the pouch deftly, then without hesitation bit his finger and let a drop of blood fall onto it. As the blood seeped in, the tightly sealed pouch loosened at the opening. Eagerly, Miao Xian pulled it open and peered inside. His heart pounded the moment he looked. The space within was terrifyingly vast. Just as he had anticipated, under the influence of his purple fortune, the pouch's capacity had expanded to its absolute limit. What he held was unmistakably a large-grade insect-rearing pouch. Though exhilarated, Miao Xian schooled his expression into perfect neutrality, betraying nothing. Old Wang stroked his beard, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. Well? How big is the space? Despite his elation, Miao Xian feigned disappointment inside. Not great. Your spatial stone didn't do much, seems like it only added about a fist's worth of extra space. This is still just a small-grade pouch. I've lost out big time. Old Wang adopted a look of exaggerated sympathy. Ah! What a shame. Your luck just wasn't with you today. But no take-backs, mind you. I made the risks clear from the start, no deception on my part. You chose to gamble, so you'll have to live with the consequences. Narrowing his eyes, Old Wang studied Miao Xian intently, as if wary he might renege. What's that supposed to mean? Do I look like someone who goes back on my word? Let me tell you, I value honesty above all. My word is my bond, I've never gone back on a deal. 450 spirit stones. I can stomach the loss. Putting on an indignant front, Miao Xian counted out the spirit stones from his pouch and tossed them onto the stall before turning away. As he left, Old Wang's expression darkened, shadows gathering in his gaze. What kind of luck is this? A casual experiment of mine accidentally produced a large-grade pouch. Those are worth tens of thousands of spirit stones. To stumble upon such a rarity, who knew I'd ever get this lucky? Torn between glee and resentment, he clenched his fists inside his sleeves. Once sufficiently far away, Miao Xian's feigned anger melted into grim seriousness. He crafted this pouch himself, does that old man truly not know its real capacity? The more he pondered, the heavier his mood grew, a chill creeping up his spine as suspicion took root. If the old man genuinely knew nothing, all was well. But if he did, then trouble loomed. Had he been honest, there'd be no need for pretense. Miao Xian's heart sank, this was bad. No more browsing. I need to leave, now. Even if the purple fortune hasn't faded, I can't stay any longer. Sensing danger, Miao Xian decisively headed for the market's exit. Though leaving now meant missing potential opportunities still under the purple fortune's influence, he had no choice. Departing during this window would minimize risks. His only means of self-defense was the ember goo. And the stronger his luck, the more powerful the ember goo became. Under the purple fortune, it was invincible. There was no better time to go. Soon, the time it took an incense stick to burn passed, and Miao Xian halted in puzzlement. He was nearly at the Miao residence, yet Old Wang hadn't pursued him. Had he misjudged the situation? Wronged an innocent man? He wondered. I see you. Come out. Testing the waters, Miao Xian called toward a patch of grass ahead. Just as he was about to step forward, convinced it was empty, a hearty laugh erupted from the foliage. Ha ha ha. Sharp eyes, young friend. You spotted me. An old man leaped out from the grass, his face twisted with cunning. It was none other than Old Wang, the pouch seller. How did you track me? Did you tamper with my insect-rearing pouch? Miao Xian's expression turned grave, his gaze locked onto Old Wang, not daring to lower his guard. This was his first battle as a goo master, and tension coiled tightly within him. Your pouch. That's my pouch. Crafted through my own good fortune, did you really think I'd let you keep it? Old Wang's face contorted with malice. After a fleeting glance toward the Miao residence, he wasted no more words, patting the pouch at his waist. A scorpion-like goo insect shot out in a blur, darting straight for Miao Xian. Chapter 22, The Innocent Ember Goo. Miao Xian had been prepared. The moment that scorpion-shaped goo insect landed on the ground, his ember goo had already leaped out of its breeding pouch, landing steadily on his right shoulder. Huff, huff, huff. The ember goo opened its mouth wide, the tuft of white fur on its head suddenly turning crimson. Then, one after another, fireballs began spewing endlessly from its gaping maw. The charging scorpion goo reacted swiftly, deftly dodging the first fireball, the second, and then the third. Yet, it ultimately failed to evade the fourth. The fireball struck it head-on, blasting it into fragments. Every spot struck by the fireballs left shallow, circular craters in the ground, the interiors charred black. The destructive power of a high-grade goo insect was undeniable, far beyond what an ordinary goo could withstand. A chill of dread crept into Miao Xian's heart. That scorpion goo had actually managed to dodge his ember goo's attacks. Thankfully, under the influence of his current purple fortune, the ember goo could spit multiple fireballs. If it had been like usual, limited to just one fireball, and the scorpion goo had dodged that single attack, his situation would have been perilous indeed. He couldn't help but sigh. No wonder no one was willing to refine an ember goo, its performance was far too unreliable. If its ability failed at a critical moment, the consequences could be deadly. Seeing his first goo insect annihilated the moment it appeared, the stall-keeper Wang's face twisted in fury. That had been his main combat goo, painstakingly raised with who knew how many resources. Yet it had died so quickly. His gaze shifted to the ember goo perched on Miao Xian's shoulder, his expression turning grave. So, a high-grade goo insect. No wonder it could kill my mid-grade goo in one strike. If I'm not mistaken, that's the Miao family's signature ember goo, isn't it? Who would have thought anyone would still refine such a cursed thing? Today it got lucky, spitting multiple fireballs. Next time, it won't have such good fortune. Facing a high-grade goo insect, stall-keeper Wang showed no fear. A high-grade goo at the early goo child stage could only match a mid-grade goo at the mid-stage. Though he had just lost one mid-grade goo, a man of his age and experience wouldn't have just one. In fact, he had two. Meanwhile, his opponent was so young, there was no way he had built up a large collection of goo. He might only have this one. There was no way that ember goo could keep spitting so many fireballs. Today's battle was already a guaranteed victory. Yet, even as he spoke, the ember goo's next volley arrived. 3 fireballs shot toward him in a row, and stall-keeper Wang's face paled. One fireball flew straight at him, while the other 2 came from the left and right, cutting off any escape. There was nowhere to dodge. Damn it! How is it spitting so many again? Panicking, stall-keeper Wang slapped his breeding pouch. In an instant, a massive gray python shot out, coiling around him with lightning speed, leaving no gaps. Just as the python fully enveloped him, the first fireball struck. Boom! The fireball slammed into the python's scales with a deafening explosion. The other 2 fireballs, meant to block his escape, missed entirely, cratering the ground to his left and right. Yet, despite their destructive force, the fireballs left no mark on the python's body. Ha ha ha. This is my mid-grade stonehide goo, renowned for its incredible defense. It's not so easy to break. Trying to fight above your level? Not so simple. Stall-keeper Wang's manic laughter echoed from within the python's coils. But his triumph was premature. Under the influence of purple fortune, how could the ember goo's fireballs be limited to just 3? Even the earlier 4 fireballs were far from its limit today. Miao Xian had simply ordered it to swallow the rest to conserve spiritual energy, and to mislead stall-keeper Wang. Seeing him standing there defenseless, Miao Xian's lips curled slightly. No longer holding back, he commanded the ember goo to unleash its full barrage. Boom! Another fireball smashed into the python's scales, the violent explosion drowning out stall-keeper Wang's laughter. This time, though the fireball still didn't wound the python, a faint black scorch mark appeared on its scales. Wah! Stall-keeper Wang's confused voice emerged from within the python, his face blank with disbelief. But it didn't end there. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The air filled with the whistling of fireballs, too many to count. The ember goo was like a machine gun, firing relentlessly. Shit! More! Inside the python, stall-keeper Wang's eyes bulged, his composure shattered. Soon, the 5th fireball struck, then the 6th. Followed by the 7th, 8th, 9th. The stonehide goo's scales, initially only slightly blackened, rapidly darkened entirely. Finally, the python could no longer endure the endless barrage. Several scales were blasted away. Behind them lay unprotected flesh, utterly defenseless against the fireball's onslaught. In the end, amid stall-keeper Wang's screams, the stonehide goo, renowned for its defense, was blown to pieces by the relentless fireballs. And the man hiding inside fared even worse. Trapped within the python's coils, he had nowhere to flee. Along with his goo, he was torn apart by the explosions. Seeing both man and goo reduced to fragments, clearly beyond saving, Miao Xian finally ordered the ember goo to cease fire. Incredibly, it was still spitting. Had its spiritual energy been unlimited, who knew how many fireballs it could have unleashed today? Stall-keeper Wang had simply been unlucky to face it. Only 19 fireballs, and it couldn't take it. How pathetic. Living so long without even a single high-grade goo, what a wasted life. A mocking smirk played on Miao Xian's lips as he strode forward. Victory in his first battle, and a fight across levels, no less, filled him with pride. But when he reached the blast site, his smile vanished. The scene was gruesome. The sheer intensity of the attack had obliterated stallkeeper Wang's breeding pouch and storage bag. Those had been full of valuables, he'd been planning to loot them. Damn it! You wasteful little. Fuming, Miao Xian smacked the ember goo's head. It turned to him, blinking in innocent confusion. With nothing left to scavenge, Miao Xian wasted no more time and swiftly departed. By the time he returned to his residence, night had fully fallen. After a moment's hesitation, he mustered his courage and knocked on his neighbor Miao Yu's door. He had no choice. He'd lost too many spirit silkworms this month and desperately needed her help. Tomorrow, the thin-faced overseer would inspect the silkworm chambers. How could he not be anxious?